Chapter 347. The battle between the two extremes became more and more intense. A sword and a halberd slashed across with heavy and sharp killing light. Neither of them showed any mercy, because any mercy was the greatest disrespect to the opponent in front of them. The Eternal Knight Hierarch's hands were dyed red. He didn't have any special techniques, nor did he have an undying body. He was just a mortal, but he was undeniably powerful. He was so powerful that he deserved to be called the strongest person in the world. The Sky Wasteland Halberd was powerful and domineering. In the hands of the Eternal Knight Hierarch, it looked even more heroic. The combination of speed and power shook the sword of primal chaos. Mubai's battle intent had already reached the peak of his life. With the sword in his hand, his entire body was like a sword. His sword was like the clouds, and his body was like flowing water. His white clothes transformed into a sword as he pierced through the horizon. Mubai was no longer in sight but the sharpest sword. In the sky above the Eternal Knight Hierarch, the sword on the sword appeared again. It was the true peak of the sword, and no one could reach it. It made the innate experts below feel that the path of the sword was so far away. They wanted to pursue the sword on the sword for the rest of their lives. Xian Tian also came. After entering the three disasters, his temperament had changed completely. Looking at the sky, his calm eyes unconsciously flashed with brilliance. The battle of wind and cloud attracted experts from all over the world. Rong Lu and Jian Bodhi were in different places, but they were also paying attention to this battle. Such a battle was also rarely seen in 100 years in the homeland of Western Buddha. A battle between experts was always so dazzling no matter when and where. Sword style, formless sword. The battle lasted for an unknown period of time. Mubai's body moved, and he used his sword style again. The primal chaos sword essence disappeared, and a series of afterimages that only the two of them could see flashed past. Thousands of sword shadows condensed into one, and then condensed again and again. Seeing this, the Eternal Knight Hierarch used his blood essence as a guide, and lightning descended from all directions. With the support of his blood essence, it turned into surging blood lightning. The moment the sword arrived, it advanced instead of retreating. With a cracking sound, a crack appeared on the Sky Wasteland Halberd. It was very light, but it was very clear. The Eternal Knight Hierarch frowned slightly, and with a flip of his palm, he sent out a surge of energy. Mubai retreated and swung his sword, slashing the palm energy. However, he was also affected by the aftershock, and a trace of blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. The battle had reached its most critical moment. The blazing sun hung high in the sky, sprinkling down its warm radiance. Since the start of the battle, both sides no longer held back. The injuries that they had suffered were unable to stop the rising fighting spirit. The outstanding fighting spirits that shone in the sky had become the most dazzling scenery in the world. 6 of the 9 forms of heaven testimony had been used, and the 7th form, which had never appeared before, was about to arrive. Before the move was used, the area within a radius of 10,000 feet had already turned into a world of swords. Swords soared into the sky one after another. At this moment, they were no longer under the control of their masters. They formed a huge spiraling cloud of swords in the sky. Tens of thousands of swords circled in the sky. The black cloud of swords covered the sky, making people feel as if it was the end of the world. At this moment, Ning Chen had also arrived. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the sword clouds spiraling in the sky. The green sparrow trembled. It was the Emperor's sword of the Zine Empire. At this moment, it also felt the call of the royal bloodline and began to buzz. "Go," Ning Chen said calmly. Hearing this, the green sparrow let out a long cry. Then, it transformed into a green shooting star that shot into the sky and entered the myriad of swords. The battle of proving the sword had finally reached its final juncture. In the next moment, streaks of sword light flew out from the center of the spiraling cloud of swords. They turned into boundless sword currents that rushed towards the Eternal Knight Hierarch. With the Chaos Sword essence as the beginning, it crashed into Tianhuang with a loud boom. After the chaos, tens of thousands of sword light followed. Under everyone's shocked gazes, it flew down from the sky. Awesome! The Eternal Knight Hierarch shouted. His black hair danced in the wind. His fighting spirit soared into the sky. He waved his halberd and broke through the swords. The clanging sounds of battle resounded through the sky like drums, bells, and gold. Tens of thousands of swords shattered, and the cracks on Tianhuang became more and more obvious. At the final moment, the green sparrow fell. Its cry shook the sky. With a loud clang, it crashed into the cracks on Tianhuang again. The halberd shattered, announcing the regret of this battle. The sword had penetrated an inch into the Eternal Knight Hierarch's chest, but it was stopped by a hand. It could not go any further. The familiar sword was thrown down from the sky and landed 10 miles away. Junior, I'll return your sword to you. The heroic Eternal Knight Hierarch was still as free and easy as before. The heroic Eternal Knight Hierarch returned the sword without any hesitation. The green sparrow flew down and stabbed into the ground. Ning Chen looked at the sword in front of him and put it back into the red wooden box. He calmly waited for the battle to end. Such an expert was indeed worthy of respect. If it weren't for their different standpoints and beliefs, he wouldn't have wanted to be their enemy. When Tianhuang broke, Mu Bai also stopped. He frowned and said calmly, "Why do you keep using the third shrine's smoke cloud divine halberd? I can't take it out now. Stop wasting time. I can still fight." Again. The Eternal Knight Hierarch took a step forward. Blood chi surged around his body. His vigorous pressure didn't decrease at all. Mu Bai frowned even more. After a moment, he withdrew his sword and dispersed his sword intent. "There's no need for this battle. I will wait for the day when you take out your weapon." After saying that, Mu Bai turned around and left. This battle wasn't in vain. The Eternal Knight Hierarch was worthy of being called the strongest expert in the world. Unfortunately, he still had some regrets. The white-clothed figure in the sky left with regret and loneliness. The legend of the Grand Xia had left, and it was difficult to find an opponent to spar with. The Eternal Knight Hierarch was the only one left, but he hadn't been able to retrieve his weapon. The path of proving one's strength was actually so difficult. "Come see me in Desolate City tonight." The last words echoed in Ning Chen's ears. The two swords of Desolate City left. One returned to Sword City, and the other continued on the path of entering the world. 10 miles away from the Eternal Knight Hierarch, Ning Chen stood quietly. Since the green sparrow had been exposed, there was no need to hide anymore. He drew his bow and aimed at the Eternal Knight Hierarch. Snow fell from the sky, and a dazzling silver light shook the surroundings. 10 miles was nothing for the Eternal Knight Hierarch, but it was even less for the heaven-pardoning arrow. When he came, he had calculated the distance. It wasn't too far, but it wasn't too close. It was barely enough time to shoot an arrow, and it was also enough to deal the greatest damage. This was a rare opportunity, and it wouldn't come again. He didn't shoot this arrow during the battle just now. This was already the greatest respect Ning Chen could give. Whether it was Mu Bai or the Eternal Knight Hierarch, they were both worthy of him waiting until the end of this battle. Looking at the silver light 10 miles away, the Eternal Knight Hierarch's expression became serious. A gentleman couldn't shoot an arrow from behind. However, the Jiming Marquis was obviously never a gentleman. It wasn't easy for him to wait until now to shoot this arrow. Of course, even if the Eternal Knight Hierarch faced this arrow head-on, he wasn't completely confident. 10 miles away, the ground cracked, showing how amazing this arrow was. Snow and ice filled the sky, as if the sky was falling, surged around Su Yi's body. The arrow, which contained the power of 3 rolls, rushed into the sky before anyone could react. Hierarch Chu Li's expression changed. He wanted to step forward to block it, but it was already too late. The heaven-splitting arrow pierced through the void, leaving behind a long black ravine. The heaven-pardoning arrow, which had been fully charged, had a terrifying might that made one's heart tremble. Even the several three-disaster powerhouses present were intimidated by the destructive aura of the arrow, their bodies turning cold. Facing this powerful arrow, the Eternal Night Hierarch focused all of his attention. Vast essence was released from his body, and his shocking cultivation erupted, forming a barrier in front of him. Ah! The heaven-pardoning arrow broke through the barrier of true essence and pierced through the Hierarch's body. Blood gushed out like rain. Within the Eternal Night Hierarch, Madame Luafei, who had been punished to reflect on her mistakes, suddenly felt her heart tremble. She rushed out, only to see this shocking scene. The heaven-pardoning arrow shattered. After this arrow, it completely dissipated. In the next moment, the Eternal Night Hierarch fell from the sky, his body soaked in blood. Father! Madame Luafei was shocked. She took a step forward and caught him. Her weak aura gradually scattered. Retreat! Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. His feet moved, and his figure quickly retreated. Chu Li looked back at the Hierarch whose aura was gradually weakening. Her eyes were filled with grief and anger. She lost her mind and chased after him alone. Chu Li! Mi Jiang was shocked. He wanted to warn her, but it was too late. Above the vast wilderness of the western border, two figures flashed one after the other. Chu Li, who had lost her mind, couldn't care about anything else. She only wanted to kill the person in front of her. Silly woman, Ning Chen sighed. Women were infatuated, but it was also easy for them to lose their judgment. If she followed him like this, she would have no chance to go back. 10 miles away from Marquis Triumphant Return's camp, a majestic figure sensed the two's aura and quietly waited in front of the camp. When the two arrived, the glorious Era saber was unsheathed. With a mighty military aura, the saber slashed forward. Marquis knowing destiny, give me your life. Chu Li was furious. She ignored Marquis Triumphant Return's threat and locked her sharp spear on the knowing destiny body. Every move was ruthless and deadly. Marquis Triumphant Return, leave this woman to me. If anyone comes to help, please stop them. Ning Chen avoided the spear light in front of him. He clenched his left hand and said solemnly. Well, be careful. Marquis Triumphant Return responded and stood aside, guarding against anyone coming to help. At the same time, he cut off the possibility of Chu Li escaping. Marquis Wu and Wu Guan had already fought for the second time in a few days. However, the situation was completely different. Chu Li lost her mind and was full of killing intent. Although her moves were ruthless, she had lost the change ability of the last time. In addition, she was alone. Facing the knowing destiny state, she completely lost the overwhelming momentum of the last time. Ning Chen stepped on the flowing light. His figure was illusory and his saber was light. He didn't want to kill, but to trap the enemy. The saber and the spear collided. They were as fast as the wind, and the killing intent overflowed. Chu Li couldn't touch the opponent, which made her even angrier. She used all her moves and her power increased greatly. The sudden increase in power brought more flaws. She pretended to reveal her Achilles heel. Chu Li, who had lost her judgment, couldn't tell the real from the fake. Her spear pierced through the air with the power to break mountains. Ning Chen turned around and stepped into the middle palace. He instantly arrived in front of Chu Li. He condensed his sword fingers and broke the sea of qi. Ah! With a soft groan, Chu Li's body lost half of its power. However, she still endured the pain and fought back. Silly woman! Ning Chen knocked the former out with his palm. He didn't kill her. He was the one who shot the arrow. He knew very well whether it killed her or not. The Hierarch of Eternal Night was planning something. He faked his death to deceive everyone present. Wasn't he afraid that this impulsive silly woman would be killed by him? The Hierarch of Eternal Night was planning something. He faked his death to deceive everyone present. Wasn't he afraid that this impulsive silly woman would be killed by him? Chapter 348. The dark abyss was filled with a supreme aura. It was both sacred and demonic. The most mysterious place of the Eternal Night cult hid the most unknown history of the Divine Prefecture and even the 5 regions. Master. Mi Jiang knelt in front of the demon statue and bowed his head in apology. Cult Master had died in the battle, and Chu Li's fate was unknown. The strength of the divine cult had been greatly reduced in one day, and more than half of its combat power had been lost. This really caught him unprepared. Bian Jiang, as the leader of the 3 martial crowns, your performance has disappointed me. A noble and cold voice came from the golem. It did not sound like a human, but more like a god who had created the world. Master, please forgive me. Mi Jiang kowtowed. From today onwards, the Eternal Night God sect will be under your command. Complete the mission I've given you as quickly as possible, ordered the cold voice. Subordinate obeys. It's just that the divine sect has suffered heavy losses, and subordinate strength is inferior to sect masters. I'm worried that I might fail sect master's trust, said Bai Jiang respectfully. Come forward. Yes. When Bai Jiang heard the order, he got up and stepped forward. Above the demonic statue, an incomparably vigorous vast vital energy fell and rushed directly into his body. The majestic divine power broke through the barriers of the realms and rushed into the 3 disasters with an unstoppable force. A pained cry sounded out as black chi spread out from Bai Jiang's body. His black hair fluttered, and his aura continuously rose until it reached the peak of the 2nd calamity. Many thanks for the reward, Master. Bai Jiang endured the pain and knelt down. Now, you already have the strength to rival any expert in the Divine Prefecture. Don't disappoint me again. Withdraw. Yes. Mi Jiang got up and left. After Bai Jiang left, the devil chi returned to the dark abyss. The dark abyss regained its calm. With the gathering of the 7 essences, the existence behind the Eternal Night cult could send even more power into the world. The calamity of the Divine Prefecture was approaching. Night fell in desolate city, and the blood moon hung high in the sky. Ning Chen arrived as promised in front of the sword pool. He respectfully bowed and said, Senior Mu Bai. For today's battle, use your full strength to receive it. How many moves can you receive? Mu Bai calmly asked. 2 moves, Ning Chen answered honestly. Mu Bai nodded and raised his hand. The sword of primal chaos flew out of the sword pool and tore through the air, instantly arriving in front of Mu Bai. Ning Chen retreated and clenched his fists. The King of Hell's sword and Great Yin's green sparrow sword flew out at the same time. The 2 swords gathered wind and snow to block the sword of chaos. With a king sound, the 3 swords faced each other. Bai Yi drew out Ten Zhang, blocking the first sword. Right at this moment, Mu Bai, who had been standing in front of the sword pool, arrived in front of the primal chaos sword essence. With the sword in his right hand, he took another step forward. Ning Chen's silhouette transformed, trying to dodge the attack. However, the sword will followed him and he couldn't dodge it in time. Was it fast? It was so fast that it was shocking. Pang! The Yama King's sword flew out and stabbed into the ground far away. The green sparrow sword had blocked the chaos sword essence, but it was still crying out in pain. In just 2 sword strikes, the disparity between their cultivations was revealed without a doubt. Ning Chen barely managed to block the first 2 strikes, but when he was about to use the 3rd strike, his strength was already lacking. Sword style, formless sword. The formless sword struck out again. The chaos sword essence disappeared, and the sword slashed out in a line, gathering the sharpness of the world. A shadow flashed past, and thousands of sword shadows merged into one. The most concentrated sword slashed through the air. It was an unstoppable sword attack. Ning Chen no longer defended himself. The green sparrow gathered all of his Jin Yuan and crossed with the chaos sword essence. One sword after another, it flew towards the white figure in front of him. With a king sound, the sword finger blocked the green sparrow. The chaos sword essence stopped in front of Ning Chen's chest, and in the next moment, it flew back into the sword pool. Not bad. Mu Bai nodded. He had perfectly blocked the first 2 strikes. Although the 3rd strike had exceeded his limit, this brat had always liked to hide his moves. In a real battle, he should be able to barely block it. The true meaning of the sword was fast, accurate, concentrated, and ever-changing. Being able to block the first 3 strikes was already enough. The rest of what he lacked was talent and hard work. This brat's talent was just average. As for hard work, he didn't need to worry about that. I've already done what I should do. If there's nothing important, don't bother me again. Leave. Mu Bai waved his hand. Thank you, senior, for your guidance. This junior will take his leave. Ning Chen once again bowed respectfully. He put away his sword and turned to leave. Grand Xia's Jingqi Hall. The matter of the alliance between the 3 dynasties had basically come to an end. The emperors of the Barbarian dynasty and the Northern Meng dynasty had solemnly stated that they would send out their troops as soon as possible to deal with the Eternal Night cult together. The experts of the 3 dynasties had all rushed to the western front of Grand Xia. The death of the Eternal Night cult master was the best opportunity. The Northern Meng Iron Cavalry used the Heaven's Gate Pass as an excuse to enter the first impregnable pass of Grand Xia. However, their purpose was different now. The Northern Meng Iron Cavalry that passed through the Heaven's Gate Pass was as terrifying as before. The 10,000 golden armored soldiers of the Barbarian dynasty were the first to leave under the lead of the Barbarian Crown Prince. Many martial experts protected them as they rushed to the western front. The Xiantian experts of the 3 dynasties quickly gathered to assist the army in their westward expedition. The vast flood made everyone see the change in the heavens. The 3 strongest empires of the Divine Prefecture had joined forces and forced the Eternal Night Army to retreat. The blood moon in the sky became more and more obvious as the days passed. It was as if it was covered in a thin layer of bloody mist, frightening the mind. In front of the Eternal Night cult, a red figure appeared. Flames burned, creating a scene of disaster. On the throne of the 3rd Divine Palace, a black-clothed figure snorted coldly. Black energy flickered as he turned into a stream of light and appeared in front of the flames. With a punch, vigorous true essence overturned the seas and rivers. The reborn by Zhang's strength was completely different from before, and it caused the world to tremble. The Eternal Night God sect's hospitality is truly unflattering. Rong Lu shouted coldly as he raised his palm to meet the attack. Blood energy converged and collided with the black energy. Prove that you have the strength. Bai Jiang pushed his true essence to 30%, and it was like a falling mountain, suppressing the brilliant blood energy. Just what I wanted. Rong Lu's eyes turned cold as a bloody light rose from his hands. He gathered the power of the 8 Desolaces and gathered the spiritual energy of the world. There was a loud explosion and the void shook. The 2 of them both retreated 30 meters. In this duel that had yet to decide a victor, they both used their strongest abilities. What business do you have with my Eternal Night cult? Bai Jiang withdrew his aura and asked. Alliance, Rong Lu said word by word. A strange look flashed through Bai Jiang's eyes. Such an expert was indeed rare, but the price would definitely be high. What are your conditions? Bai Jiang asked calmly. Kill the Bodhi sword and steal the phoenix blood, Rong Lu said coldly. Please come in and talk. Bai Jiang narrowed his eyes. Rong Lu stepped forward. The 2 peak experts of the world walked together, each with their own thoughts. At the peak of the 9 heavens of the 4 extreme realms, one figure after another flew through the turbulent flow of space. It was unknown how long they had been traveling, but they were still rushing towards the divine continent. Ning Chen sat in his study day and night, looking at the reports from the imperial palace and the grand court, thinking about every step of the plan. This was the most critical moment, and there was no room for the slightest mistake. Marquis, the princess is awake. At this time, Ruoshi knocked on the study door. Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes lit up. He immediately got up and walked out of the study. In the bedroom, Xinu, who had been unconscious for over a month, finally opened her eyes. Her delicate face was slightly pale, and she looked even more delicate. The person that entered her eyes was familiar and gentle, so gentle that it didn't seem real. Xia Xinyu stretched out her hand, wanting to feel if it was real or fake, but halfway through, she didn't have the strength to do so. Ning Chen stepped forward and held her hand, saying softly, "Princess, don't be afraid. We're already home." The touch was so real, so warm. Xia Xinyu opened her mouth and said something, but it was so soft that it couldn't be heard. Only Ning Chen, who was closest to her, heard it clearly. After being stripped of 80 to 90% of the 7 extinction force, Xianyu's body was still very weak. After saying that, she fell asleep again. "Take good care of her." Ning Chen was silent for a moment. Then, he left. The moon hung high in the sky, rushing through the wilderness. Behind him, Bodhi chased step by step. The golden figure was difficult to shake off. His footsteps became faster and faster as he flashed across the wilderness. Bodhi's salvation, stopping evil by killing. Suddenly, not far away, a powerful palm strike came. Black chi surged, and the terrifying power made the moonlight dim. Bodhi's eyes narrowed. His left hand formed a seal to block the attack. With a bang, sand flew up. At the same time, Ronglu's palm struck out and a bloody light shot out, attacking Bodhi. Bai Jiang and Ronglu, the 2 peak experts of the world, blocked Bodhi's path of survival. This was also an opportunity for the 2 sides to form an alliance. Within the dust, Sua Luo opened its blade, and a dazzling light shone. Bodhi looked at the 2 figures on his left and right. His calm eyes also flashed with a trace of seriousness. "Bald donkey, your path has come to an end," said Ronglu coldly. "Guests from the homeland of Western Buddha, are you satisfied with this arrangement?" Bai Jiang's lips curled up in a murderous smile. "Bodhi can only accept your hospitality." Bodhi's heart meditation, the Dharma is boundless. Facing the 2 experts, Bodhi once again opened his Buddha origin world. Buddha light rose, illuminating the world. The swastika rotated, turning 1,000 feet into a world of Buddha. A final struggle. Ronglu coldly snorted. His figure flashed, and his blood saber slashed down. Bright red light and killing intent were revealed. Bai Jiang also stepped forward, and a black chi condensed in his palm. The terrifying power didn't seem like the power of a martial artist. Bodhi's will pardons sins. Within the Buddha light, the ancient Polo Luo sword spun rapidly, drawing on Bodhi's true yuan. Endless clear saint energy gathered, slashing apart the sin-severing divine weapon. Blood splashed out. Ronglu had taken Bodhi's attack head-on and was forced back several steps. He vomited blood. Drip. The sound of blood dripping was very light. Blood dripped from Bodhi's mouth. In front of him, Bai Jiang's palm landed on Bodhi's chest in exchange for a similar injury. Bodhi retreated half a step. His dermic seal transformed into a finger sword, forcing away the person in front of him. Sword Bodhi, exchange 1 move for another. How many moves can you take? Ronglu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and coldly mocked. Let's cut the crap. It's time to send him to the west to see Buddha. Black chi spread out from Bai Jiang's body. It was endless, and it constantly devoured the Buddha light. This was his final move. Ronglu didn't say anything else. His true chi circulated, and his blood yuan rapidly spread within the Buddha light. The Rong tribe's forbidden move had appeared once more. Amitabha. The path of Bodhi's will was difficult to find. Just at this critical moment, an azure-red figure charged into the battle. With a single saber, he cut open the path. Chapter 349. The sudden change caused Bai Jiang and Ronglu to be unable to react in time. They reacted in a panic and with a bang, they were forced back several steps. Who are you? Bai Jiang's eyes turned cold. The dark aura around his body surged. His body moved like a stream of light, instantly arriving in front of the attacker. The power of his palm shook the sky, mercilessly oppressing. Just a passerby. The red-robed man casually replied. His saber slashed through the air. He wasn't at a disadvantage in front of Bai Jiang, who had been reborn. The saber and the palm clashed. Clanging sounds rang out continuously. The splendor of life became even more beautiful in the midst of the killing. Let's go. After several quick exchanges, the man's saber forced away the person in front of him. He took Jian Bodhi and left the battlefield. Rong Lu tried to stop him, but it was too late. Looking at the two of them leaving, his expression sank. Just who was this strange expert? When did such an expert appear in the Divine Continent? Asked Rong Lu. Although he hadn't been in the Divine Continent for long, he knew that there had never been such a peak expert. I've never seen such an expert. However, such an expert shouldn't be unknown. Bai Jiang's eyes flashed. There was definitely something fishy about this matter. He had to figure it out as soon as possible. 300 miles away, the red-robed man and Jian Bodhi appeared. Jian Bodhi condensed his yuan and suppressed his injuries. Many thanks for your help, benefactor. Ha, Grandmaster is too polite. It was nothing, smiled the man. May I ask for benefactor's name? Asked Jian Bodhi. I am Li Luo, said the man. Jian Bodhi thought for a moment. He was sure he had never heard of this name before, so he committed it to memory. Grandmaster doesn't suspect this name is fake, smiled Li Luo. There had never been a three-disaster expert called Li Luo in the Divine Continent. If it were him, he would also suspect it. A name is just a title. It can't be determined if it's real or fake. The person who helped Jian Bodhi is called Li Luo, and he is only Li Luo, said Jian Bodhi calmly. Ah, Grandmaster's words are reasonable. It was I who was thinking too much. Li Luo freely smiled. Right, does Grandmaster come from the Western Buddha homeland? Asked Li Luo. Yes. Jian Bodhi nodded. So that red-robed monster also came from the Western Buddha homeland? Continued Li Luo. Okay, Jian Bodhi replied. Hey, Grandmaster, you're in the wrong here. The Divine Continent is already in a complete mess. What are you doing here? Li Luo said helplessly. This poor monk is ashamed, Jian Bodhi apologized. Ha, I was just joking. Grandmaster, please don't take it seriously. Li Luo softly chuckled. Soon after, he glanced at the sky that was about to brighten and asked, Grandmaster is injured and needs a safe place to recuperate. May I know where Grandmaster is preparing to go? I can send Grandmaster off. Jian Bodhi thought for a moment and said, I have some ties with the Jiming Marquis of Great Xia. I can only trouble you for a few days. Hearing the words knowing destiny, a strange light flashed through Li Luo's eyes. He nodded. Let's go. The two of them headed east. When the sun was high in the sky, the two of them appeared outside the royal city of Grand Xia. Li Luo halted his steps, a smile on his face. Grandmaster, I shall escort you up to here. Benefactor, are you not entering the city? Sword Bodhi asked. No, I have some grudges with the Marquis. Now is not the time to meet him. Li Luo shook his head. This Sword Bodhi respectfully sends off Benefactor. The Sword Bodhi bowed and sent him off. Until we meet again. Li Luo smiled. With a move of his feet, his figure turned into a shadow and disappeared in a flash. Sword Bodhi watched the former leave before turning around and heading back to the city. Inside the Jiming Manor, Ning Chen received the news of Jian Bodhi's visit. Showing a strange expression, he got up to greet him. Senior Jian Bodhi, are you injured? Ning Chen noticed the former's unstable breathing and asked with concern. This monk was careless and fell into Rong Lu's trap. I received some injuries, so I came to disturb you for a few days. Jian Bodhi explained. Senior is too polite, this way please. Ning Chen led the way to the backyard. After the Northern Meng delegation left, the manor returned to its usual tranquility. The old steward was in charge of the front yard and Ruoshi was in charge of the backyard. Ning Shi was a silly girl who couldn't even take care of herself. The arrangement for Bodhi's treatment was naturally left to Ruo Shi. Most of the medicine in the Marquis estate was bought from the Duan pharmacy. The Marquis estate's silver was personally allocated by the eldest grandson. In theory, they shouldn't be able to afford Duan pharmacy's heavenly treasures. However, Duan pharmacy was the property of Zhang Xuan's family. If they really couldn't afford it, they would owe it first and pay it back slowly. Shopkeeper Ruo Shi came again with a smile and handed over a prescription. The shopkeeper saw the girl in front of him coming to get the medicine and chuckled softly. But when he took the prescription, his face immediately turned green. "Lu girl, tell your Marquis to prepare the money." Although the shopkeeper felt the pinch, he still took the prescription and handed it over. "Can I see the account book?" Ruo Shi chuckled. "Here." The shopkeeper casually moved a stack of account books from the counter and said, "Every book here is the account book." Ruo Shi was speechless and smiled embarrassedly. So it turned out that there were already so many. "Shopkeeper, your medicine is too expensive. The silver that her ladyship allocates to the manor every month is not enough to get the medicine once." Ruo Shi's confidence was obviously not enough. She didn't know the cost of firewood and rice. The Marquis's backyard needed a variety of elixirs all year round. Forget about the daylily, this was the Marquis's friend. Why should even the princess's expenses be counted in the Marquis's account? "You go and reflect to her ladyship. Most of the prices of these herbs were set by her ladyship in the past." The shopkeeper said in a bad mood. "I don't dare." Ruo Shi shook her head vigorously and said. Even the Marquis didn't dare to say anything in front of her ladyship. She was just an ordinary girl. How could she dare to bargain with her ladyship? "I also don't dare, so let your Marquis quickly return the money," the shopkeeper suggested. "Well, I will go back and talk to the Marquis." Ruo Shi smiled sweetly and hurried away with the medicine. The shopkeeper smiled helplessly. This girl has changed a lot over the years. That brat doesn't understand a woman's heart, but this girl looks very satisfied. Inside the Marquis's mansion, Ning Chen and Jian Bodhi were talking and understanding the ins and outs of the matter. After hearing about this three disasters powerhouse named Li Luo, Ning Chen pondered for a long time and roughly thought of a person, but he couldn't be sure for the time being. Only after meeting him can he confirm whether this Li Luo was the person he was thinking of. In addition, that Bai Jiang suddenly had a strength that didn't lose to any powerhouse in the world. It was really incredible. Now that Rong Lu and Bai Jiang had joined forces, the balance that had been pulled back once again by the Eternal Night cult. With two supreme experts and the demonized Zi, their future path was still as difficult to traverse as before. Senior Jian Bodhi, even in the Buddhist homeland of the West where Buddhism is flourishing, there is no way to turn a demonized person back. At the end of the conversation, Ning Chen once again held a glimmer of hope and asked. "There is no way." Jian Bodhi shook his head and said, "For thousands of years, there have been several demonized people in the Buddhist homeland of the West. The sages of the past also tried to turn them back, but in the end, they all failed and caused a great disaster. Later on, as long as someone became a demonized person, according to the rules of the Buddhist homeland, they were all killed." Hearing this, the last glimmer of hope in Ning Chen's heart sank. The headmaster had also warned that once a demonized person became a demonized person, it would be difficult to turn back. But, was the heavens really not willing to leave a way out? Zi had been kind all her life. What was wrong with that? Why should kind people be bullied? Why should they suffer? "Senior, please rest first. This junior won't disturb you any longer." Ning Chen cupped his hands and bowed, then left the room. In the study, Ning Chen pushed open the bookshelf. Behind him, a secret room appeared. In the secret room, a woman in gorgeous armor was thinking about something. When she saw the person who walked in, her expression immediately flashed with a strong killing intent. "Marquis Jiming, what do you want to do by trapping me here?" Chu Li said coldly. The person in front of her had sealed her Qi Si but didn't kill her. Clearly, he had other plans. Let's make a deal. You tell me one thing, and I'll tell you one thing, Ningchen said. Dream on. I won't say anything, Chu Li snorted coldly and mocked. The Eternal Night Hierarch is not dead, Ningchen said indifferently. Chu Li's delicate body trembled. Disbelief flashed across her gorgeous face. How could it be? You're lying. How could the Hierarch still be alive? Chu Li's eyes were full of disbelief. She clearly felt the Hierarch's aura rapidly weakening. Even his heartbeat and meridians were almost undetectable. Are you interested now? Can we sit down and talk? Ningchen walked to a table and sat down. What do you want to know? Chu Li sat opposite him and said coldly. Who is the person behind the Eternal Night Hierarch? Ningchen asked seriously. I don't know much. I only know that he has two names. One is Seven Ju Tian. Chu Li paused, and a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. The other name is Lord of Hell. Ningchen's eyes narrowed. Everyone knew that the Eternal Night Hierarch worshipped Seven Ju Tian. However, the name Lord of Hell was really shocking. Whether in Huaxia or in this world, Lord Yama was the god who controlled the world of death. The person behind the Eternal Night cult was given such a title. Was this person really so powerful? I've already answered your question. Now it's time for you to answer mine, Chu Li said in a low voice. That arrow missed. It didn't hurt the Eternal Night Hierarch's heart at all. The reason why it looked so exaggerated was because Zhetian's endurance was limited. It was shattered by your Hierarch's body. That's why when it flew out from his back, blood sprayed all over the sky. This time, it was basically a show directed and acted out by himself. Of course, he probably didn't expect you to chase after him so impulsively, Ningchen explained slowly. Chu Li's eyes flashed when she heard Ningchen's words. She carefully thought about it and finally sorted it out. She came back to her senses and looked at the young man in front of her. Is this why you didn't kill me? It's one of the reasons. I also want to see what your Hierarch is up to. Also, I really need a hostage right now. As for the reason, you'll know soon enough, Ningchen said calmly. Chapter 350. In a strange space, after the seven essences gathered, an illusory figure floated up and down, getting clearer and clearer by the day. Then, an incomparably powerful pressure loomed. It was like the origin of the whole world, looking down on the world, unreachable. The dark aura gathered, and a huge black figure appeared. It did not look like a human, nor was it a monster. It was an ancient existence, indescribably noble. King. Under the black shadow, numerous figures knelt down. They were equally powerful and terrifying. Every one of them was stronger than the three disasters of humanity. However, even such powerful existences were filled with respect in front of this noble aura. They did not dare to overstep their boundaries. The high and mighty figure was like a god. Just by standing there, it gave people an unreachable heavy pressure that could not be described with words. At the same time, in the divine prefecture, the blood on the moon was getting more and more obvious. In the imperial city of the Great Xia, Meng Xuanji came from the four extremes to ask about the reason. Now that the divine prefecture and the four extremes were connected, the four extremes would definitely be affected by the changes in the divine prefecture. A terrifying expert is about to appear behind the Eternal Night God sect. Ningchen explained the whole story in a simple manner. How strong is it? Meng Xuanji asked. I don't know. Ningchen shook his head and said, I've experienced it once at close range. However, an existence at such a level has already exceeded my knowledge, and it's difficult for me to describe it clearly. The only feeling I have is that even an ancient sage at the peak of the three disasters would definitely lose before it. Meng Xuanji's expression changed. The ancient sages were already invincible existences in the world, and it was difficult for them to appear again in thousands of years. She could not imagine what kind of monster an existence beyond the ancient sages would be. Once such an existence descended, no one could fight against it. The Great Xia, Northern Meng, and the Barbarian dynasty have joined forces to take down the Eternal Night sect in the shortest time possible. However, the most difficult thing is that no one knows how to stop it. Ning Chen expressed his worries. Joining forces to take down the sect was the only way out, but it was also the only thing they could do now. No one knew when that terrifying existence would descend, or what kind of conditions it would require. Now, there were two people who were most likely to know. One was the leader of the three martial crowns, Bai Jiang, who was mentioned by Chu Li, and the other was the hierarch of the Eternal Night who was pretending to be dead. What are your plans? Meng Xuanji asked seriously. Ha! Ning Chen smiled bitterly. What kind of plan could he have? He wasn't omnipotent. Now that he didn't know what was going on, he could only take one step at a time. Meng Xuanji was startled when she saw the bitter smile on the former's face. Soon after, she sighed softly in her heart. She had subconsciously asked the question earlier. After knowing each other for so long, in her impression, there seemed to be nothing in the world that could stump the person in front of her. Now that she thought about it, no matter how smart the man in front of her was, he was still human. He would get hurt, he would get tired, and there would also be times when he was powerless. People who were too strong would always subconsciously make others rely on them, causing everyone to overlook the fact that he also had times when he was tired and didn't know where to go. This was the first time she had seen Ning Chen like this. It was also the first time she truly realized that the person before her was just an ordinary person like her. He was not the tireless and calculative monster that he was in the past. Next, I will try to find a way to weaken the battle strength of the three disasters of the Eternal Night cult as soon as possible. Then, I will force the Eternal Night cult leader to show himself. As for the rest of the road, it will depend on the actions of Bian Jiang or the Eternal Night cult leader. Ning Chen told her his plan. Although the road ahead was difficult, he had to find a way to go on. The Eternal Night cult was the root of the disaster. Since he didn't know how to stop it, he might as well take down the cult first. If he pushed too hard, the fox's tail would be revealed sooner or later. If there's anything I can do, just let me know. Meng Xuanji expressed her attitude and said seriously. Okay. Ning Chen nodded and softly agreed. Day after day passed. On the western front of the Great Xia, the reinforcements sent by the Northern Meng Imperial Court and the Barbarian dynasty came in batches. Even the Eternal Night cult, which controlled dozens of dynasties in the west, could barely cope with the alliance of the three strongest dynasties in the Divine Prefecture. The appearance of the Demon Monarch and Bian Jiang, two powerful experts of the three disasters, changed the situation of the battle. The alliance of the three dynasties was hindered and couldn't advance an inch. Marquis' victorious return barely held back Bian Jiang, but none of the Xiantian experts of the three dynasties could stop the Demon Monarch. With a single demonic sword, he was invincible. The Demon Monarch, who had stepped into the three disasters, displayed terrifying battle prowess. He was almost as strong as the martial monarch of the past, shocking everyone in the world. After Ning Chen received the battle report, he was silent for a long time. He knew better than anyone that Zi was very strong. Before he stepped into the three disasters, he could already fight against the three disasters. Now that he had stepped into the three disasters, his strength was close to the strongest in the world. Senior, let's go. Ning Chen said. Okay. Jian Bodhi, who had just recovered from his injuries, walked out and followed Ning Chen to the west. In the Eternal Night cult, a letter from the Great Xia camp was delivered. Bian Jiang read it and frowned. The content of the letter was very simple. The hostage exchange was Chu Li for Xia Zi. Bian Jiang thought for a moment and didn't hesitate too much. He directly replied. Compared to the Demon Monarch, he trusted Chu Li more. In addition, this was an opportunity. If used well, it could severely injure the Great Xia's peak battle prowess. Aside from his master, how could anyone suppress a person who had become a devil? In the Great Xia's Blackwater army camp, Marquis triumphant returned past Bian Jiang's letter to the youth in front of him. I accept. Ning Chen received the letter and carefully read it. Then, he clenched his fist, shattering the paper. Senior Marquis triumphant return, your future path will be even more difficult. Ning Chen looked to the west. Don't worry. Zhongyong, I, and the others will do our best to help you. Marquis triumphant return solemnly promised. The youth in front of him had already surpassed him. In just a few short years, the latter had grown into the most indispensable pillar of the Great Xia. Now, it was time for the inheritance to arrive. Not far away, Jian Bodhi looked at the two martial Marquis of Great Xia in the tent and was silent in his heart. Although human nature was selfish, there would always be some pure people who would work hard to persevere in their own beliefs and never waver. The reason why Great Xia had flourished for 1,000 years was clearly displayed in this tent. In the end, the inheritance was the greatest foundation. In the cold night, the cold wind rustled. A crescent moon hung high in the sky. In the tent, everyone was seriously discussing the details of every step. At this crucial moment, every step could not be wrong. At daybreak, Ning Chen looked at the Great Xia war god who had fought for the Great Xia for his entire life. Senior Marquis triumphant return, you can't suppress the three calamities any longer. Otherwise, when it descends, there will be no possibility of passing it. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Marquis triumphant return didn't want to talk too much about this topic. Looking at the bright sky, he said, let's go, the appointed time has arrived. The army gathered and the drums sounded. The soldiers of the Blackwater army were ready to go. Following the Great Xia war god's command, they headed west. 15 kilometers away, the Evernight army was also waiting in formation. At the very front, two figures stood quietly. Their bodies were as deep as the abyss and were particularly eye-catching. The head of the martial crown, Bian Jiang, and the eternal night demon monarch. The demon monarch didn't have a demon sword in his hand and his chi-si was sealed. However, just standing there made people tremble. In front of the Blackwater army, Marquis triumphant return walked over with Chu Li. His gorgeous armor was dazzling under the morning sun. Seeing the familiar figure in front of him, a trace of gentleness flashed through Bai Jiang's cold eyes. He pushed the demon monarch whose chi-si was sealed forward. 1 for 1, fair and just. Both sides were on high alert. Knowing that there might be changes in the deal, they carefully observed the people around them who might appear at any time. Bai Jiang looked around and didn't see the Jiming Marquis. He sneered in his heart. The Jiming Marquis must have already arrived. If they wanted to make a sudden move, they would need to have the ability. Hopefully, they would be satisfied with the gift he had given them. The two walked past each other. Just as Xia Zi arrived in front of Marquis triumphant return, the demonic aura around him erupted and broke through the seal. He clenched his hand and a demon's sword flew out from the army. Startled, Marquis triumphant return drew his glorious era saber and blocked the sword. At the same time, Bai Jiang rushed in front of Chu Li. He condensed his energy and quickly shook open the seal in the latter's chi-si. At this moment, a plain-looking figure walked over. Bodhi appeared, Suo Luo unsheathed and slashed at Bai Jiang. Is this your trump card? Rong Lu, you should deal with your old opponent. Bai Jiang coldly snorted and flipped his palm to meet the Suo Luo sword. That's exactly what I was thinking. A scarlet figure appeared and blood essence surged, trapping Bodhi. Chu Li, let's deal with Marquis triumphant return together. Bai Jiang freed his hand and looked at the woman beside him. Chu Li nodded. She didn't say anything. Her figure flashed and she instantly entered the battle. 3 of the strongest experts of the current era trapped the Grand Xia's war god. Triumphant return was in danger. Military might spreads 10,000 miles. As the crisis descended, Marquis triumphant return raised his glorious era saber. His aura surged and his military might was unparalleled. The demon monarch stepped forward. Demonic aura curled around his demon sword. A sword of reincarnation shook the 9 heavens. With a bang, sand flew everywhere. Triumphant return retreated half a step, the corner of his mouth dyed red. In a crisis that couldn't be resolved, every step was difficult. Bodhi was trapped and couldn't help. Knowing Marquis, if you still don't appear, you'll have to wait to collect Marquis triumphant returns corpse. Bai Jiang sneered. He swept his spiritual sense around, but he still didn't find knowing destiny. At the same time, he became more vigilant and his attacks became fiercer. There was no response. Bai Jiang's eyes turned cold. Black aura surged out of his body. He was about to completely end Marquis Triumphant Return's life. The vast energy continued to spread. Suddenly, Chu Li changed the direction of his palm and imprinted a palm on Bai Jiang's chest. Bai Jiang didn't have time to react. It was so sudden that he vomited blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. How was this possible? Go to hell. Xiao Chen's soul-locking palm caused wind and snow to surge. Xiao Chen's appearance in the gorgeous armor changed, and the aura that the Chaos Scroll had concealed completely burst out. Xiao Chen pushed his palm forward, adding 30% more force. It's you. Bai Jiang's expression immediately became sinister. He was filled with endless hatred. Chapter 351. After this deadly palm strike, the surging black aura surged and spread out endlessly. Behind the gorgeous armor, black hair danced in the wind, and his appearance changed. He was cold and merciless as he activated his true origin energy. The heavily injured Bai Jiang had blood dripping from his mouth. His aura was extremely unstable and was on the verge of dissipating. However, at the last moment, the black gas gathered back into Bai Jiang's body. You're still not dead? Ning Chen snorted. He clenched his right hand, and a red wooden box opened behind the Blackwater army. A green sparrow flew out of its sheath and into the battle. Knowing Destiny held his sword, and his aura changed. His sword was sharp and piercing. With his injuries, Bai Jiang found it hard to summon his true origin energy. He lost the absolute suppression of his cultivation and was restrained. Meng Xuanji, I'll leave this to you. Ning Chen had other missions, so he didn't want to fight. He shouted and dashed out. At the same time, a beautiful figure dashed in, and the battle changed instantly. The gilded feather saber was sharp, and it shot out rays of killing light trapping Wu Guan. In the battle between Marquis Triumphant Return and the Demon Monarch, Knowing Destiny joined the battle. The great Xia war god moved quickly and slashed at Rong Lu. Rong Lu was shocked, and he used his saber to block the attack. The two sabers clashed, and a huge explosion occurred. Sword Bodhi retreated, and Sua Luo took the lead to fight the Eternal Night Demon Monarch with Knowing Destiny. In the blink of an eye, the opponents had changed. Marquis Triumphant Return and Meng Xuanji focused on delaying, preventing Rong Lu and Bai Jiang from coming to help. The most important battle was Sword Bodhi and Ning Chen working together to fight the Demon Monarch. Today, they would bring the Emperor back. Demon's sword, bury the heavens. The Demon Monarch waved the demon's sword in his hand, and thousands of sword intents appeared. The bury the heavens sword surged out, and its powerful aura destroyed everything in its path. When they clashed again, the power was completely different. Ning Chen's expression was solemn. He gathered the phoenix image into his body, and his sword spun rapidly and pierced through the air. Knowing Destiny retreated, and the Sua Luo ancient sword approached. It shone with golden light as it fought the demon's sword. One retreated while the other advanced. Their tacit cooperation was flawless. However, the Emperor who had the demon's sword in his hand was not afraid at all. He fought against two powerhouses with one sword and was not at a disadvantage. Rong Lu and Bai Jiang were shocked. Although they knew that this demon lord was not simple, they did not expect him to be so strong. King Wu of the Great Xia dynasty had never been weaker than anyone else in his life. Even though he had joined the Devil Path, he was still a genius among the Devil Path. The brilliance of the three swords intersecting drew streaks of killing splendor under the morning sun. In the most intense confrontation, a moment of distraction would result in death. "Friend, your sword is too weak." The devil cultivator's voice was as cold as an abyss. There was not the slightest emotion in his pitch-black eyes. He had given up everything. Only the sword in his hand could be trusted. "Don't be affected," Sword Bodhi said solemnly as he waved his sword to block the devil's sword. Ning Chen nodded and did not say a word. The green sparrow condensed into frost and the sword moved as fast as the wind. In the beginning, the two swords admired each other. Later, they trusted each other with life and death. Now, they were facing each other in life and death. How cruel was that? However, only by winning with the sword could he bring his friend back. The demon's sword and the emperor's sword hummed in the wind. Killing light scattered, and terrifying sword scars appeared around the two of them. Sword Bodhi waved his sword to help, and the Suo Luo ancient sword circulated. He used all his strength to help knowing destiny suppress the powerful devil cultivator. On the other two battlefields, Marquis' triumphant return and Meng Xuanji's battle was also not easy. However, they could not afford to lose this battle. The two of them could only persevere. Blood splattered across the three battlefields. For the sake of their perseverance, no one was willing to back down even a little. The extremely intense battle shocked everyone. The strongest people in the world were all gathered on the battlefield. As they intersected, snowflakes and flowers of blood bloomed magnificently at the crossing of life and death. Scroll of the Earth, 1000 Earth Revolutions. The scroll of the Earth was unleashed. The Earth rumbled as it rose, forming a concave shape that quickly closed in. With a bang, the devil cultivator was trapped. Demon's sword, reincarnation. Reincarnation spun, and a half-moon sword chi cut through the earth. A black-clothed figure swept out, instantly arriving in front of knowing destiny. The demon's sword showed off its might and killing light shone brightly. Ning Chen took half a step back, and the cyan sparrow turned around. The sharp snow-white light reversed the direction of the devil cultivator. Fast swords clashed. One was fast, and the other was even faster. The two strongest people of the younger generation were truly fighting to the death at this moment. They did not hold back at all, and their abilities shocked the world. Strong, and still strong. Only after seeing it with their own eyes did they realize that the former king and marquis of the Grand Xia had reached such a terrifying level. Spiritual yuan appeared above their heads. It was a heaven and earth phenomenon caused by battle intent reaching the limit. The sound of swords reverberated, and it was incomparably powerful. Close friends fought not because of enmity or hatred, but because of a chance. Giving oneself a chance was also giving the other party a chance. The road ahead was difficult. Accompanied by the sonorous sound of swords, life and death intertwined. When one was lost, no matter how difficult it was, one had to reach out and pull him back. Scroll of the Earth, earth destruction and mountain destruction. The falling sword light that soared into the sky turned the area around him into a desolation. Boundless sword intent surged like a sword rain that was moving in reverse. It was majestic, grand, and unavoidable. The demon jumped up, and demonic energy wrapped around the demon's sword. Circle after circle spread out, and then he descended from the sky. The momentum of his descent brought with it supreme demonic might, breaking the sword rain that filled the sky. The tips of the two swords clashed, and the shockwaves shook the heavens and the earth. Sand and dust flew everywhere. The brilliant battle made people look over. In the distance, the experts of the Blackwater army were silent. If such a strong emperor was not forced to become a demon, the current Grand Xia would not need to fear anyone. Unfortunately, there was no such thing as hypotheticals in the world. An emperor who became a demon was filled with killing intent, and one could not see the coldness and warmth of human nature. The sword light slashed past his ear, and his black hair fell. He held his sword and slashed across the sky. A sword followed, and the rustling of the wind could not keep up with the changes of the sword. There was no turning back in this battle, and it would only end when one side was defeated. It was unknown when the sword Bodhi had withdrawn from the battle. The ancient sword had returned to its scabbard, and the leaves of the Sora rustled. The golden brilliance was dazzling as it gathered the Buddha energy. This was a battle that could not be lost, and it made people more and more nervous. The sword was held by the devil, and it was also the persistence of the knowing destiny state. With a peng sound, the two sides of the sword became clear. The demonic sword moved in the opposite direction, drawing out a brilliant streak of blood. Ning Chen endured his injuries and changed the direction of his sword, knocking away the demon's sword. At the same time, he stretched out his left hand and grabbed Ning Chen's right shoulder. The wind and snow surged and the freezing air surged. The scroll of life was pushed to its peak, forcefully obstructing the movements of the demonic cultivators. "Senior!" Ning Chen shouted in a deep voice. Amidst the wind and snow, his aura rose crazily. Phoenix cries resounded in the sky, and a dazzling blood mist burst out from his body. Under the pressure, the demonic energy fiercely counterattacked, gushing out like a tide. This was the most direct confrontation of foundation and cultivation, causing the battle to enter its most dangerous phase. Blood continuously dripped from the corner of Ning Chen's mouth. He endured the pain all over his body to buy time for the Bodhi sword. Outside the battle, the Bodhi sword chanted and Sua Luo guided the light. The Buddhist 6 syllables appeared and turned into golden chains, trapping the demonic cultivators. The Bodhi sword suppressed the devil's sovereign, and the scroll of life increased the power of the chains, trapping the sovereign within. The surging demonic energy, cold energy, and Bodhi sword collided rapidly in the air. The mouths of the Bodhi sword, knowing destiny state, and the demonic cultivators were all dyed red. Terrifying true essence fluctuations shook the surrounding 10 li, causing large cracks to appear. The Bodhi sword and Ning Chen took another step forward, forcefully enduring their injuries. At this crucial moment, how could they allow any failure? The chain-shaped swastika continued to revolve. Under the joint efforts of the two, it finally entered the demonic cultivators' bodies, forcefully locking down the surging demonic energy. Seeing that he had succeeded, Ning Chen retreated from the battle. His figure flashed, instantly arriving beside Meng Xuanji, who was in the most critical situation. His sword split open the wind and clouds, blocking Bai Zhang's killing move. "Retreat!" With an order, the four quickly left the battlefield, rushing towards the army behind. The demonic cultivators and the demonic sword were both taken away. The difficult battle thus came to an end. Bai Zhang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the four retreating. Killing intent surged in his eyes, but he didn't chase after them. Knowing Destiny State's group had clearly come prepared. If they chased after them now, there might be an ambush waiting for them. The four arrived at the Blackwater Army's camp. After a huge battle, they were all heavily injured. Ning Chen, Meng Xuanji, and the Bodhi sword didn't stay for long. After stabilizing their injuries, they brought the demonic cultivators back to Grand Xia's imperial city. Inside a sealed stone room in the Knowing Destiny Marquis manor, the demonic cultivators stood silently. His deep eyes were cold and calm, without any ripples. In front of the stone room, the Bodhi sword was chanting in the language of heaven, turning into rays of Buddha light that pressed down on the demonic cultivators. A trace of pain flashed through the demonic cultivator's eyes. As he continued to chant, blood flowed out from his eyes and ears. The unyielding demonic cultivators didn't say a word and endured the pain. His tall and straight body didn't bend at all. Outside the stone room, Ning Chen looked at his friend who was bleeding from his 7 orifices. Although he couldn't bear it, he forced himself to harden his heart. The sun rose and set. From night to morning, and then from morning to day, the Bodhi sword continued to purify the demonic cultivators' demonic chi. One day and night passed, but the demonic cultivators were still unyielding. If they couldn't purify the demonic chi, then even the supreme Bodhi sword wouldn't be able to do anything. The demonic cultivators closed their eyes and blood dripped out. Under the Bodhi sword's power, it was as if 10,000 swords were stabbing into his body. Bodhi waved his hand and the Sura sword appeared. The Bodhi sword's Bodhi sword continuously flowed out. An hour later, the Bodhi sword left and the door to the stone room slowly closed. "It's not working?" asked Ning Chen bitterly. The demonic chi devours the heart and cannot be purified. Furthermore, there's even worse news. This person's soul is not in his body. It should have been taken by someone else, said the Bodhi sword. Ning Chen's eyes turned cold. With the three souls incomplete, life and death were no longer under the control of the body. With Zi's strength, even Bai Jiang and the Eternal Night Hierarch wouldn't be able to easily suppress her. It was clear who had taken her soul. Ning Chen, how is royal brother? Xianyu walked over with Ruoshi's support. Her beautiful face was still sickly pale. When the cold wind blew, she trembled slightly. Ning Chen took off his clothes and covered her with them. He retracted the bitterness and coldness in his eyes and gently said, "He's fine. It's just that it's a little troublesome to remove the demonic chi from Zi's body. However, I will find a solution as soon as possible. Didn't you say that I'm the smartest person among us?" Chapter 352. On the west side of the Great Xia, where the flames of war had passed, there were ruins everywhere. The years of war had caused the prosperity of the past to disappear. In the wilderness, a young man in white with a broken sword on his back silently walked forward. He entered the world to cultivate and walked step by step. The result of the war was shocking. Even swordsmen who were usually calm were affected by this scene and couldn't bear to see it. It was hard to say whether the change in the state of mind was a good or bad thing. The path of swordsmanship required a calm mind. However, there was a knowing destiny state cultivator who had never been able to calm down and comprehend swordsmanship. Yet, he had reached his current height through continuous battles. There were thousands of paths on the path of the sword. Mu Bai and the Yen Prince had both reached a level that others couldn't compare to. If the younger generation wanted to walk the same path, they were destined to never surpass the two of them. Just at this moment, a swordsman in purple and white also walked over silently. The house sword on his back had been in its sheath for a long time. After entering the three disasters, he rarely appeared and kept a low profile. In the past, the number one swordsman of the four extreme realms was trapped by the master of the four extreme realms. He had betrayed his own path and couldn't advance anymore. Now, the knot in his heart had been untied and he had entered the three disasters. However, he once again didn't know where to go. The two people who passed each other didn't say anything. The broken sword and the house sword trembled slightly, resonating with each other due to the aura of the swords. The two didn't turn back and walked away in search of their own paths. Within the stone room of the Knowing Destiny Marquis Manor, the Sualuo sword was suppressing the demonic cultivator. It shone with a golden light and continuously chased away the demonic chi. However, the demonic chi was endless and couldn't bring back the demonic emperor. Ning Chen stood in front of the stone chamber in silence. From noon to sunset, he didn't say a word. Within the manor, no one dared to disturb him. Even the usually heartless Ning Shi was silent at this moment. The path to knowing destiny state was difficult to walk. In the past, he had a good friend who could walk side by side with him. Now, there was only one person left. The two people separated by the stone door looked at each other. One was as cold as the abyss and the other was as calm as the autumn water. However, under the abyss and the autumn water, who could see the blood and tears? Within the manor, a red-clothed guard from the Tylee division had been waiting for a long time. Seeing the sun set, a trace of anxiousness flashed across his face. "What is it?" Ning Chen withdrew his gaze from the stone room and glanced at the figure not far away. Reporting to the Marquis, there's been a change in the battle situation over at the department head side. The red-clothed guard quickly stepped forward and reported the battle situation from the southeast. Ning Chen took the battle report. After reading it, he frowned. This Menyiang country was really disgusting. "Get up. I'll make a trip there in 2 days," said Ning Chen calmly. "Many thanks, Marquis." The red-clothed guard bowed respectfully, stood up, and left. Ning Chen looked at the things described in the letter and said with a cold look in his eyes. An 8-headed monster comparable to the three disasters realm was really rare. However, he was not surprised. There were even primordial species like the tautai, the nine-headed snakelet, and the phoenix. It was not unacceptable for an eight-headed monster to appear. Ruashi, I'm going out for a bit. I'll be back within 3 days. During this time, if there are any guests, make sure to receive them well. Ning Chen looked back at the woman who had been standing beside him. Yes. Ruashi nodded and softly agreed. Ning Chen waved his hand and a long mahogany box flew out from the room. Catching it, he put it on his back and turned to leave. The southeast region was the border between the Grand Xia and Menyiang country. The war had been going on for who knows how many years. The Menyiang country was arrogant and capricious. If it weren't for their remote location making it easy to defend and difficult to attack, there would be no such annoying people in the world. The Marquis in charge of guarding this area had already led his troops to the west to provide support. This time, he was determined to let the Menyiang country know the true meaning of pain. Outside Donghua City, the sound of a flute was desolate. A huge monster with 8 heads rumbled as it descended. On one of the heads was a barefoot woman dressed in red. Blowing the flute in her hand, she controlled the snake to move forward. Behind the monster, the black mass of the Menyiang country's army quickly closed in. There were at least 100,000 of them, and their wild ambitions were evident. Kong Yu stood on top of the city wall, his fists clenched so tightly that they cracked. After several months, the cold and gloomy expression on his face had lessened, and he now looked more like a general than the ruthless Tylee division head. Retreat. The most helpless choice was to retreat without a fight. Shame lingered in his heart. Only now did Kong Yu understand that the Marquis was not only talking about glory, but also a responsibility he had to shoulder. The Grand Xia soldiers looked at the monster in front of them with shock and anger. Although they were unwilling, they could only listen to the order and retreat. Kong Yu, how is it? Do you understand now? As he spoke, a plainclothed figure appeared below the city wall. Seeing the person who came, Kong Yu was shocked at first, but he quickly recovered and said with a serious face, "Thank you, Marquis. Now, I'll teach you one last thing." Ning Chen opened the mahogany box and the azure sparrow appeared in his hand. Looking at the army in front of him, he coldly said, "In this world, whoever has the biggest fist has the right to speak. Don't believe in bullshit benevolence and righteousness. If you are benevolent, then you are being cruel to the people behind you." The azure sparrow let out a long cry and a dazzling rainbow light streaked across the sky. A sword pierced through the air, cutting through thousands of majestic sword intent. The 8-headed snake raised its head to the sky and roared, shaking heaven and earth. On one of the snake's heads, the red-robed woman's eyes were filled with killing intent. The sound of her flute was bleak, disturbing people's minds. The sword intent swept past, causing blood to splatter around the snake. However, to a monster the size of a small mountain, it was only able to injure its tendons. The woman took a step, dodging the sword light that came close to her. Her delicate hands formed hand seals, and huge logs fell from the sky. He had never seen such a strange technique before. Ning Chen coldly snorted. With a sweep of his sword, the logs in front of him exploded, filling the sky with fragments. If you have the guts to come, then there's no need for you to return. Ning Shuang's sword directly stabbed into one of the snake's heads. The sword spun through the air, causing blood to spurt out. Roar! With a pained roar, the giant snake's head exploded. The remaining 7 heads danced and lunged towards the person in front of it. Its bloody maw was terrifying to the extreme. Being controlled by the flute, the 8-headed snake didn't know fear. Each of its heads breathed out clouds and mist, making it hard to endure. Ning Chen stepped on the water, his figure was like an illusion. His sword moved like a dragon, so fast that it was hard to see with the naked eye. In the eyes of Hotian martial artists, the snake's scales were impenetrable. However, at this moment, they were as fragile as paper. The sword light slashed across, and blood fell like rain. The red-robed woman was terrified. The flute sound changed a few times, but it still couldn't change the final result. She could only watch as the guardian beast beneath her was slaughtered. With loud bangs, heads fell to the ground one by one. Blood dyed the area around them red. The soldiers of Menyang country who were slightly closer were affected and fell to the ground in fear. With a sword to the throat, the flute broke. The red-robed woman didn't even have time to react. Only the unwillingness in her eyes could not be hidden. In front of the small mountain of snake corpses, Ningchen glanced at the army that was retreating in fear. He didn't care. This matter didn't affect the overall situation, and he needed to return as soon as possible. I'll leave the rest to you. The green sparrow returned to its sheath. Ningchen carried the mahogany box and left. Farewell, Marquis. On the city wall, the great Xia soldiers recovered from their shock and bowed respectfully. Open the city gate, chase. Looking at the retreating army, Kong Yu's eyes flashed coldly and ordered. Yes. All the generals ordered. The anger that had been suppressed for several days exploded in an instant. They led the army out of the city and chased after the defeated army. In the imperial city of Xia, a swordsman in purple and white robes unknowingly walked over. Looking at the Marquis mansion, he hesitated for a moment before walking up. This one is Xian Tian, requesting an audience with the Marquis. Xian Tian looked at the guard in front of him and calmly said. Looking at the purple and white figure with a sword in front of him, the guard was slightly shocked. He politely asked for a moment and immediately walked into the mansion. The Marquis said that if you meet a person who can't feel any martial artist's aura, but still make you subconsciously feel fear, then this person is likely to be a three-disaster powerhouse. A few days ago, there was the Eternal Night Hierarch. Today, there was an unfamiliar swordsman. When did three-disaster powerhouses become so worthless? When the old housekeeper heard the report, he hurried to the backyard to report that the Marquis wasn't here. This person wouldn't be here to cause trouble, right? Ruoshi came out of the backyard and gracefully invited Xian Tian to the front hall to receive him. At this time, outside the mansion, a red-haired figure walked in. The former Holy Son of the Four Realms, the current Lord of the Holy Land, also came to the Divine Land to investigate the matter of the Blood Moon. When the two met again, their appearances had changed. Hatred? It couldn't be said, only regret in his heart that was difficult to erase. Holy Son. Xian Tian bowed, still calling him Holy Son. In his heart, the Lord of the Holy Land would always be the domain lord. Kindness would not be erased because of anything. Although the domain lord did not do what he wanted, he never regretted it. Xian Tian, congratulations. Being able to step into the three-disaster realm meant that the former had broken through the shackles in his heart. Xian Tian was originally the most talented swordsman of the four extremes. Now that he took this step, it was already many years too late. Thank you, Holy Son. Xian Tian calmly said. What are you here for? Chaotic Wind Dust asked. To settle the past, to give the domain lord and also to give myself an explanation. Xian Tian replied. Chaotic Wind Dust nodded, not saying anything more. Xian Tian had already made up his mind, so he couldn't change it. He hoped that after this battle, the past could be completely settled. The two of them waited for over 2 hours. Just as the sun was about to set, their eyes flashed at the same time. He had arrived. A plain-clothed figure appeared in front of the manor. He was carrying a mahogany box, and the smell of blood still hadn't dissipated from his body. Marquis, there's a guest. Ruoshi stepped forward to greet him. I know. Thank you for your hard work. Ningchen nodded. The two of them walked out from the front hall. Looking at the young man in front of them, they had different thoughts. You still came. Ningchen glanced at Xianji. Please. Xianji earnestly said. Ruoshi, stand back. Ningchen ordered. Yes. Ruoshi nodded and retreated to the side. The azure sparrow flew out, followed by vast sword. The moment they clashed, it trembled. Sword against sword. At this moment, there was only the battle of swords. The past had come to an end. In the end, they had returned to the beginning of the battle of swords. Their true essence was restrained, but danger still surrounded them. Between the swords, no one showed any mercy. Chapter 353. The Battle of the Marquis Manor was a battle of the past. Life and death didn't matter between swords. The clanging of swords and the rustling of the wind were shocking. A rarely seen sword battle was quietly taking place within the Marquis Manor. The manor's guards couldn't help turning their heads to look at the battle of swords. They couldn't move their eyes away. If it were any other day, they wouldn't even have the qualifications to get close to such a battle. Only today were they able to watch it up close. After an unknown amount of time, the moon was high in the sky. The clanging of swords finally ended. After the transformation, Xian Tian no longer hesitated. His limitless sword was as sharp as before. Ning Chen raised his sword. Before the burden on his shoulders fell, he didn't allow anyone to stop him. The sharpness of his sword pressed down on people's hearts. With a clang, the two swords met. A strand of hair fell from Xian Tian's ear. He sheathed his limitless sword and left. After this battle, he had no regrets. Ning Chen looked at the departing purple-white figure. His plain clothes tore apart. "He's different from before," said Luan Fengchen. "Yes." Ning Chen nodded. "He truly was different. Can you tell me what's going on with the moon in the sky?" Luan Fengchen raised his head to look at the blood-red moon in the sky. "It's a long story." Ning Chen told him everything that had happened recently. Meng Xuanji and Luan Fengchen had both come. It seemed that the other experts of the four extremities would also come to the Divine Prefecture to find the source. Hopefully, this wasn't a disaster. After hearing the whole story, Luan Fengchen couldn't hide his shock. Did such a terrifying monster really exist in this world? He had only heard of ancient sages at the peak of the three calamities being able to affect the heavens. As for existences beyond that level, it was hard to imagine. "Where's Meng Xuanji?" asked Luan Fengchen. "She's a bit injured. She's currently in seclusion healing." Ning Chen replied. Last time, there had been an accident. Bai Jiang had been injured but hadn't died. After all, Meng Xuanji hadn't reached the three calamities and didn't have the glorious battle armor like Marquis' triumphant return. Last time, Xian Ji also had the same black aura, but it was much weaker than Bai Jiang's. It could be seen that the existence behind the Eternal Night sect was more powerful than before. The Eternal Night God cult still had Bai Jiang and Rong Lu, two supreme experts in the three disaster realms. They still couldn't gain the upper hand in a head-on confrontation. They had to think of a way to divide the two. There was no such thing as absolute loyalty in an alliance of interests. "Chaotic Wind Dust, I have something I need your help with," said Ning Chen seriously. "Go ahead," Chaotic Wind Dust replied. Ning Chen explained the plan in detail. Rong Lu came from the west and was unfamiliar with the situation in the Divine Land. Now that Luan Fengchen was the master of a saint land, it would be better for her to get in touch with Rong Lu. Luan Fengchen's eyes narrowed. Only the person in front of him could come up with such a plan. "Be careful. This Rong Lu is not easy to deal with," Ning Chen warned. "Rest assured." Luan Fengchen nodded. Even if he made a mistake and couldn't win, running away was more than enough. After midnight, Luan Fengchen also left. Ning Chen looked at the blood moon in the sky, unable to hide the worry in his eyes. Even though he had more helpers now, he still didn't have much confidence in facing this unknown enemy. In the study, Ning Chen pushed open the bookshelf and walked in. Compared to last time, Chu Li's expression had changed a lot. She was calmer and less murderous. "Jiming Marquis, how long do you plan on keeping me here?" asked Chu Li coldly. "I want to see the Eternal Night Hierarch." "Miss Chu Li, do you have any ideas?" Ning Chen didn't beat around the bush and got straight to the point. Chu Li frowned and raised her head to look at the young man in front of her. What was this Jiming Marquis planning? Miss Chu Li, I don't have any ill intentions. However, if you insist on not cooperating, I can't guarantee that we can still talk calmly like we are now, said Ning Chen seriously. Hearing this, Chu Li's eyes flashed coldly. A moment later, she restrained herself. The person in front of her was the Jiming Marquis. He couldn't possibly have the slightest concern for the fairer sex. Angering him wouldn't do her any good. The hierarch has always been a loner. I can't do anything about it, said Chu Li as calmly as she could while suppressing her anger. That really is a pity. Ning Chen sighed regretfully and walked out. Miss, if you're about to die, do you think your hierarch will come and save you? His final words echoed through the secret room. Chu Li's expression became angry, but before she could say anything, the door to the secret room had already closed. 3 days later, a martial Marquis decree regarding the execution of the Eternal Night martial crown spread throughout the world. Ning Chen had written it in such a flamboyant manner that he hadn't concealed it in the slightest. Within the Eternal Night God sect, when Bai Jiang received this report, he couldn't suppress his anger. This was clearly a provocation. Be careful, warned Rong Lu, I know. Whether or not it's a trap, I still have to save you, said Bai Jiang. Ha! Rong Lu faintly laughed. His words were filled with mockery. I didn't expect the head of the martial crown to be someone who has tender feelings for the fairer sex. Rong Lu, please pay attention to your words. I'm not always in the mood to listen to your jokes, said Bai Jiang coldly. Naturally. Lord Martial Crown, please go ahead. Rong Lu's lips curled into an icy smile. He didn't say anything else. Within the Eternal Night God sect's first palace, Luo Fei looked at the empty throne. After a long time, she turned and left. At the same time, 15 miles away from the Eternal Night God sect, Luan Fengchen walked over and calmly stood there, waiting for Rong Lu to appear. A beautiful figure flew out and then disappeared a moment later. Luan Fengchen didn't pay attention to her. Her goal was only Rong Lu. As for the other troubles, Ning Chen would have to deal with them himself. Within the Jiming Marquis residence, after the execution order was sent out, it became the focus of everyone's attention. The Eternal Night Martial Crown was a half-step 3 disaster expert. This shocking news shook the entire Divine Continent. In this world, the only person who would dare to openly provoke the Eternal Night God sect was the person in the Jiming Marquis residence. Within the Marquis residence, Ning Chen calmly waited in the courtyard. He released his aura without hiding it at all. He was waiting for the Eternal Night God sect's hierarch to come. Of course, if he caught some other fish, he would be happy to see them. Although Chu Li was easily angered, he knew too little. The person he wanted to see the Eternal Night God sect's hierarch the most. After playing dead for so long, he even fooled his own subordinates. There had to be some reason. Outside the imperial city, a pair of calm eyes quietly looked in the direction of the Jiming Marquis residence. Suddenly, a beautiful figure flew past. Finally, a trace of fluctuation flashed across the calm eyes. With a soft sigh, the figure of Qing Hong walked out from the darkness and chased after her. She's here. Under the moonlight, Ning Chen looked at the beautiful figure in the distance and narrowed his eyes. The bright moonlight carried a murderous aura. Her slender hand slapped down with anger, hatred, and regret. The powerful palm made the real moon in the sky lose its color. Scroll of the Moon, Moonfall. Chapter 354. The moon fell from the sky with the power to split open the sky. Guanghan fell, as if the sky was falling. Ning Chen turned his palm to block the attack. His whole body was shining with silver light. He rushed forward and his feet sank 3 inches into the ground. Broken stone slabs flew in the courtyard. Sword Bodhi walked out. Buddha energy spread out and stabilized the shaking ground. Luo Fei's face was full of anger. This was the first time she used her full strength since she came out of seclusion. Ning Chen condensed his fingers into a sword and fought the furious Eternal Night Sect girl. Between the sword moves, 70% of it was attacking and 30% of it was defending. The brilliance of the moon swayed in the night sky. Luo Fei descended like the goddess of Guanghan. Between the moves, killing intent was revealed. She was no longer as calm as before. The battle of the Heavenly Book martial arts had reached a climax in the Marquis mansion. Luo Fei, who was at the peak of the four tribulations, was a person with great perseverance. After stepping into the innate realm, she abolished her cultivation and recultivated the moon scroll. Her foundation was extraordinary. Facing the knowing destiny state with 3 scrolls, she did not show the slightest fear. The sword and palm collided. In close combat, there was even more danger. Every move was like the road to the underworld. Luo Fei, are you the only one who came? Ning Chen stepped on the water. His body was like a phantom. His sword moved so fast that it was difficult to distinguish. I am enough. Luo Fei shouted coldly. The moonlight around her dispersed. In the moon, the real and the fake appeared. Her slender hand was threatening to kill. Ning Chen met the attack head-on. His eyes narrowed. The Heavenly Book indeed had its own mysteries. In the past, Luo Fei rarely fought. Even if she did, she never used her full strength. Today, he saw that she really lived up to her name. The battle for the heavenly tomes was incomparably magnificent. Under the moonlight, the goddess of Guanghan's robes fluttered in the wind. Her moves were as graceful as a phoenix's dance. She was so powerful that it was shocking. The Eternal Night Sect's daughter, who had once caused Zhong Qianqiu to feel apprehensive, displayed a shocking martial art. She was like a banished immortal, and the moonlight illuminated the 9 heavens. Ning Chen used his finger as a sword. He pointed, slashed, swept, and shook. He did not dare to be careless. The pressing killing intent overflowed. The goddess of Guanghan was suppressing the knowing destiny state. The battle was in a stalemate. Excuse me. Seeing Luo Fei's amazing strength, Ning Chen took half a step back. His expression hardened and he clenched his hand. Not too far away, a long mahogany box opened and a blue sparrow flew out. A cold sword light shined in the moonlight, threatening the mind. With the sword in his hand, knowing Ming's aura changed abruptly. His murderous aura surged, completely different from before. When the sword came out of overturning snow, the world turned solemn. The surging splendor of the frost brought about a boundless chill. Stop! At this moment, a calm voice sounded in the courtyard. A green-red figure appeared out of nowhere and blocked the murderous sword with his saber. You're finally willing to show yourself. Ning Chen waved his hand, and the azure sparrow returned to its sheath. Jiming Marquis, I can't hide anything from you. Li Luo sighed softly, and then he glanced at the nearby Bodhi sword and said, Grandmaster, I never expected that we would meet again so soon. Amit Ba. This poor monk greets you, said Jian Bodhi with a smile. Grandmaster is too polite. Li Luo smiled. Father? Looking at the strange yet familiar back in front of her, Luo Fei's eyes flashed with disbelief. Silly daughter. Li Luo turned back and gently said. Jiming Marquis was the only person in the world who knew he wasn't dead. Before he appeared, Chu Li would be fine. He didn't know if he should be gratified or helpless to have such a sentimental daughter. Ruoxi, invite Miss Luo Fei in for tea. Ning Chen looked at Ruoxi behind Jian Bodhi and ordered. Yes. Ruoxi walked out and came to Luo Fei's side. Miss Luo Fei, please. Luo Fei glanced at the 2 people in front of her, unable to understand what was going on. Go, I have something to discuss with Jiming Marquis. Li Luo said. Luo Fei left with a puzzled Ruoxi. Jian Bodhi also returned to his room to rest after completing his task. In the courtyard, there were only 2 people left. The atmosphere was stagnant and indescribably heavy. The tea is ready, please. Ning Chen calmly said first. Deference is no substitute for obedience. Li Luo faintly smiled and followed. In the study, under the slightly dim candlelight, two faces were reflected. The tea was boiling and steam rose. Sect leader, please. Ning Chen personally poured a cup of tea and pushed it in front of the former. Li Luo took a sip of the tea with a faint smile on his face. Jiming Marquis' wisdom is extraordinary, but your tea brewing skills are really ordinary. Fighting too many battles, these hands only know how to use the sword. Ning Chen said with a hidden meaning. The Grand Xia being able to hold on to this day is indeed beyond my expectations. Jiming Marquis' ability is amazing. Li Luo didn't hesitate to praise. Originally, when he came to the Grand Xia, he couldn't get past the Northern Meng royal court. He didn't expect the final result to be beyond his expectations. Fan Lingyue's life was consumed little by little, several months earlier than expected. As for the chaos of the Four Poles later, except for the strength of the Master of the Four Poles, nothing else was worth mentioning. Sect leader overpraises me. I have kept your secret for so long, shouldn't you give me an explanation? The tea in the cup was upside down like small needles. Ning Chen calmly said as he felt the warmth from the tea. It's a long story. Since Chu Li was captured, Jiming Marquis must have already found out the name of Yama. Li Luo said indifferently. 7 absolute heavens, the god that the Eternal Night sect believes in. Ning Chen replied. Does Jiming Marquis believe that there are gods in the world? Li Luo asked. There shouldn't be. Ning Chen's hand holding the teacup paused for a moment before he replied. There shouldn't be, but many things in the world that shouldn't be can really exist. Li Luo said. With a crack, the teacup shattered. Ning Chen looked at the blood dripping from his hand, a cold light flashed in his eyes. The separation of the 5 regions was also his doing. Yes, and no. Li Luo sighed and continued, 30,000 years ago, he had already descended once and completely wiped out the 5 regions, leaving only a few races to continue. The separation of the 5 regions was because they couldn't bear his might. The divine continent was accidentally separated from the other 4 regions. Strictly speaking, it wasn't his wish, it was just an accident. Sounds like nonsense to me. Ning Chen said coldly. There were gods in the world. Was there anything more ridiculous than this? You've personally experienced how terrifying he is. Whether it's true or not, I don't need to explain, Li Luo replied. Ning Chen pondered for a moment, then raised his head and said, Sect Master doesn't want to be the master of the divine continent? Ha! Li Luo smiled and said, if I want to do it, I'll do it myself. There's no need for others to interfere. Ning Chen stared at the person in front of him. After a long time, he slowly said, where is Xia Zi's lost soul? The central spirit region, the border between the divine continent and his world. It's currently being held back by the Yenyun divine spear to ensure that the 2 worlds don't completely separate. Is this also the reason why you can't take out the Yenyun divine spear? Ning Chen frowned. Yes. Li Luo nodded and explained, although Yama can't descend on the divine continent, he can send a portion of his power to the central spirit region. At the very least, he's close to the peak of the 3 disasters. With my strength alone, I can't take it out. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and asked, as long as I take out the divine spear, he won't be able to descend? In theory, that's the case. Once the divine spear is taken out, the 2 worlds will be separated. However, this is only my guess, Li Luo said seriously. Sect Master should have more opportunities on the surface. Why are you pretending to be dead and hiding in the shadows? Ning Chen asked his last question. Monitoring Bianjiang. Li Luo said calmly, the 3 palace halls of Eternal Night have different missions. Martial Monarch is in charge of the frontline battle, Zhong Qianqiu is mainly in charge of handling the matter of the Nether King's descent, and my mission is to borrow the strength of the Nether King and the divine sect Xiantian experts to hold the 2 realms together. The 3 palace masters don't interfere with each other. However, in recent years, the central spirit region has gradually stabilized, and with martial monarch's death, the divine sect's peak battle strength is insufficient, so my mission has changed accordingly. As for Bian Jiang, coming out of seclusion at this time, he must have accepted Zhong Qianqiu's unfinished mission under the orders of the Nether King. Ning Chen came to a sudden realization. No wonder the three great shrines of Evernight had emerged at such different times. Outside the study, the night gradually deepened. The reflection of the two people's conversation was reflected on the window. It was unknown how much time had passed. At daybreak, Ning Chen walked out of the study. Half a day later, the news of the Evernight sect's daughter being captured spread once more, shocking the world. Ever since the war between the Grand Xia and the Evernight Church, the situation hadn't been optimistic. Now that two of the Evernight Church's most important figures had been captured, it was truly shocking. Ning Chen couldn't completely believe the Evernight sect master's words. The Evernight sect master was also clear on this point. If they wanted to continue cooperating, they had to show their sincerity. Luofei staying in the Marquis manor was the Evernight sect master's greatest sincerity. Of course, the premise was that Luofei and Chu Li wouldn't be in any danger. The two reached an agreement. The Evernight sect master would continue to appear as Li Luo to secretly monitor Bian Jiang and find a way to stop the Yama's descent. Ning Chen was responsible for continuing to pressure Bian Jiang, making him reveal as much as possible. As for retrieving Xia Zi's soul and the Misty Cloud Spear, that was too difficult. With his current strength, it was impossible. He had to think of another way. 3 days later, the autumn wind was bleak. The carriage carrying the prisoners was heading towards the West Meridian gate outside the palace. The accompanying soldiers were on standby. Heaven's Reach realm martial artists stood on both sides of the carriage. It was an extraordinary formation. One could see how important the person escorting the prisoners was. Evernight Wu Guan, a top expert half a step away from the Three Disasters realm. He was an existence that could make the world tremble with a stomp of his foot. But today, he was reduced to a prisoner and was to be beheaded at the Meridian Gate. As they approached the Meridian Gate, suddenly, a powerful aura descended from the sky. Black waves of qi covered the sky and startled the people in the city. His black robe fluttered as he stood in the void. Bian Jiang descended without saying a word and directly grabbed the woman on the prisoner carriage. With the lesson from last time, Bian Jiang had learned his lesson. Black qi swirled around his hand and sealed Chu Li's Dantian Qi Si. At this moment, the earth trembled. Sword qi gushed out from the ground and rushed to the 9 heavens. Humph! Bian Jiang snorted and changed the direction of his palm. Black qi surged and collided with the soaring sword qi. At this moment, the light of Buddha shone. Sala opened its blade and cleansed the world. Actually, I didn't want to come. With a soft sigh, Rong Lu appeared and waved his blade to block the ancient Sala sword. Everyone could see through such an obvious scheme. Besides, he hated being schemed against. Chapter 355. Sword Bodhi and Rong Lu, the old rivals who had lasted for 100 years, met again. The Buddha and Rong Lu were locked in battle. In front of the prisoner carriage, Ji Ming came out and blocked with his sword, not allowing Bai Jiang to get close. "You can leave now," Ning Chen said. "Yes." The Heavens Reach martial artists and soldiers received the order and quickly retreated from the battle. Bai Jiang was afraid of Ji Ming's sword and Chu Li, so he didn't dare to act recklessly. "Bai Jiang, how about we make a deal?" Ning Chen said calmly. "What deal?" Bai Jiang's eyes flickered coldly. "If Rong Lu dies, I will let her go," Ning Chen said coldly. Bai Jiang's face darkened. Did he think he was a fool to drive a wedge between them? "Even if I kill you, I can still take her away." Before he finished speaking, a black light flashed and Bai Jiang attacked. Suddenly, a blade appeared in front of him, blocking his way. "You again." Seeing the red figure in front of him, Bai Jiang couldn't suppress his anger. Who was this person? I just happened to pass by. Li Luo said with a smile. Now, how confident do you think you are in rescuing him? Ning Chen asked coldly. Bai Jiang's face changed several times. He transmitted his voice to Rong Lu, who was fighting. Their target is you, be careful. Passerby, can you help me kill the man in red? Ning Chen walked to the prisoner carriage, put his sword in front of Chu Li's throat and said calmly. That's what I was thinking. Li Luo chuckled, his figure rushed into the battle of the Buddha Rong Lu, waving his blade to kill. With the two besieging, the situation of Rong Lu was immediately unfavorable. Bai Jiang, what are you hesitating for? Rong Lu was furious and shouted. The cold light of the blue sparrow was in front of Chu Li's throat. Bai Jiang's face was livid, and he said in a deep voice, Ming Marquis, I have seen your despicable shamelessness today. Oh, thanks for the compliment. How about this, I will take a step back. You leave the imperial city now, and I swear in the name of Ming Marquis, I will let Chu Li live after half an hour. At this point, Ning Chen changed the topic and said coldly, of course, if you don't agree, you can wait to collect Chu Li's corpse. In the current situation, you don't have any chance to save him. Bian Zhang's expression kept changing. He glanced at Rong Lu and hesitated for a moment before transmitting, Rong Lu, hold on for an hour. I'll be back soon. After that, Bian Zhang looked back at the young man in front of him and said coldly, Ming Marquis, remember your oath. You know the price of breaking an oath. I know that better than you, Ning Chen said indifferently. Bai Jiang snorted coldly. The black qi dispersed and disappeared. With the departure of their allies, the situation at Rong Lu became even more disadvantageous. Sabers and swords trapped the Rong Lu. The battle between the three strongest experts of the current era caused the buildings to collapse. It made one feel as if the end of the world had arrived. There was no one around, only the whistling sound of blades and swords could be heard. Rong Lu knew that he had fallen into a trap and wanted to retreat quickly. The green sparrow flew past, knowing its destiny to join the battle, blocking the path ahead. An hour couldn't be considered long. This moment had become the boundary between life and death. If he could break through, he would escape with his life. If he couldn't, he would return to the Yellow Springs. Rong Lu activated his blood origin and thousands of blood tribulations surged like a tide. Blood light surged and heaven and earth suffered a calamity. Blood calamity collapses the world. A terrifying aura exploded out. A blood-colored world spread, spreading in all directions. Blood flowed out of his wounds. The wounds caused by the sabers and swords rapidly healed. The Rong race's special cultivation technique was fully displayed. You really can take a beating. Li Luo smiled. While attacking from all sides, he pressed a palm against Rong Lu's chest. With a bang, blood fell like rain. You can't kill me. Rong Lu coughed out a mouthful of blood. He abandoned his saber and condensed his energy. Boundless blood qi surged as he fought against the three of them. Another special cultivation technique. When did it become so worthless? Ning Chen snorted coldly. His sword momentum changed as he changed his target and attacked Rong Lu's Dantian Qi Si. Ha, the stronger you are, the more you value your life. You have to train in some life-saving techniques. Li Luo smiled. Did I come too late? Just at this moment, a rainbow saber appeared. Red hair danced in the wind, dazzling to the eye. You're not late. Just in time, replied Ning Chen. With Luan Fengchen joining the battle, the balance of the battle was tipped even further. 2 sabers and 2 swords trapped the Rong race's king. The carefully calculated time limit and the strength of each side had pushed Fan Zhang's bottom line as far as he could accept. Although an hour seemed short, it was harder than ascending to the heavens. Rong Lu, you've been abandoned by your trusted ally. How do you feel? Asked Ning Chen as his sword brushed past Rong Lu's right rib. Jiming Marquis, your plan to sow discord is so childish it's laughable, mocked Rong Lu, sow discord? You're thinking too much. Do you think it's necessary for someone who's about to die? Asked Ningchen calmly. You underestimate Rong Lu too much. Roared Rong Lu, enduring his heavy injuries. He pushed aside the sabers and swords in front of him. You want to leave? Wishful thinking. After the sabers and swords came an even sharper one. There was no pause. The battle of the Rong race had entered its most critical moment. The Azure Sparrow and the Rainbow Saber exchanged glances. Suddenly, the Rainbow Saber turned and stabbed into Jiming's chest. The sudden change shocked everyone. Rong Lu took the chance to push back Bodhi and Li Luo. Jiming Marquis, you've been betrayed by your most trusted ally. How do you feel? Jiming coughed up blood, dyeing his clothes red. He didn't even have time to say anything before he was drowned in blood. Are you satisfied with my sincerity? Asked Luan Fengchen calmly as he glanced at Rong Lu. Let's go. Rong Lu didn't answer. He wrapped the two of them in his blood yuan and quickly left. The desolate street was riddled with holes after the battle. Jian Bodhi walked to Jiming and sent his qi into Jiming's body. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. In the distance, a black aura was approaching again. Li Luo's expression hardened as he stood in front of the two. This shocking scene caused Bai Zhang's eyes to narrow. This unexpected ending was truly shocking. Let him go. Ning Chen coughed up another mouthful of blood. He had no choice but to let him go. Bai Zhang sneered and shattered the prison carriage with a single palm. He then left with the unconscious Chu Li. In the backyard of the Jiming Marquis residence, Madame Luo looked at the Jiming Marquis being brought back. Her beautiful face flashed with surprise. It was hard to believe that such a lineup would be injured to this extent. News of the Jiming Marquis being heavily injured spread throughout the world. 5 days after the news spread, the Jiming Marquis residents quickly came out to refute the rumors. However, the Jiming Marquis, who was the key to dispelling the rumors, had yet to appear. The various actions of the Marquis residents seemed weak and powerless at this moment, as if they were trying to hide something. In the third divine palace of Evernight, Bai Jiang sat on the throne, listening to the reports of the people below. What about the Weiyang Palace? Has there been any movement? Asked Bai Jiang. No, that Empress Dowager still hasn't left the Weiyang Palace, said the figure below respectfully. Bai Jiang sneered. This acting was too much. Given the relationship between the Weiyang Palace and the Jiming Marquis, how could she not visit him? The more they tried to hide it, the more it meant that the Jiming Marquis was truly doomed this time. If the Jiming Marquis died, then the alliance between the Grand Xia, Northern Meng, and the barbarian dynasty would be a joke. Rong Lu and Luan Fengchen appeared outside Peerless City. The former headquarters of the four extreme armies had been almost completely destroyed due to the war. They hadn't had time to rebuild it. How about it? Join hands with me. Compared to that treacherous Bai Jiang, it should be easy to choose, said Luan Fengchen. Why? Rong Lu turned his head and narrowed his eyes. To betray a companion so decisively, that saber strike had truly surprised him. Bai Jiang couldn't be trusted, and the person in front of him couldn't be that strong. Before power and benefits, our past alliance isn't worth mentioning. Between us, there's no conflict of interest. It's the best choice, said Luan Fengchen calmly. Rong Lu carefully weighed the pros and cons. The four extreme realms were indeed a good choice to join hands with. Unlike Bai Jiang, this person might have a large amount of Xiantian resources, but due to his cultivation base, he couldn't completely intimidate him. If they joined hands, even if this person betrayed him in the future, he was confident he could eliminate him. Seeing Rong Lu waver, Luan Fengchen continued, from what I see, your cultivation technique has extremely high requirements for blood yuan. The Phoenix Perch Mountain of the four extreme realms has already been confirmed to contain 2 phoenixes. If you help me unify the 4 extreme realms, I'll definitely find a way to help you trap those 2 phoenixes in the future. Rong Lu's eyes shone brightly, and he no longer hesitated. Deal. Luan Fengchen smiled. Let's go. With that, the two of them flew toward Ascension Valley. Rong Lu had finally left for the time being. At the same time, within the Eternal Night God sect, Chu Li was still unconscious. Bai Jiang frowned, unable to find the reason. Without a doubt, the Jiming Marquis had done something to Chu Li's body. Bai Jiang walked over from the dark abyss. Behind the opened coffins, the images of gods and demons fell silent. He waited for a long time, but there was no response. Since there was no response, Bai Jiang sighed and left first. Half a day later, outside the Eternal Night God sect, a black aura flew out and headed southeast. After Bai Jiang left, the green-red figure, who had been waiting for a long time, followed. They were very far away and were very cautious. In the southeast of the Great Xia, outside Donghua City, the black aura gathered. Looking at the battlefield after the battle between the Great Xia and the Menyiang Kingdom, he drew a strange seal with his hands. The blood of the eight-headed snake flew up from the dust. Bai Jiang used the blood as a guide to find the source of the ferocious beasts. The Eternal Night God scripture was affected by the Chaos Scroll. Originally, it would have taken some time to find the hiding place of these ferocious beasts. He didn't expect the Menyiang Kingdom to find them first. The Hydra was the most cunning of all the ferocious beasts. It separated its life source from its main body. Although its power was weakened, as long as its life source wasn't destroyed, even if something happened to its main body, there was still hope for it to be revived. Found it. The origin tracing technique took effect. Bai Jiang looked in the direction of Menyiang country in the distance and sped off. Chapter 356. In the homeland of Western Buddhism, the moon shone brightly. Wave after wave of pursuits had been going on for several days. Many Buddhist cultivators, the Owl clan, the Yen clan, the Zhao clan, and even the Roan clan surrounded them again, joining forces to fight against the cultivators from the alien realm. Hand over the scroll of nothingness and I'll spare your life. A red-robed Buddha walked out from among the Buddhist cultivators. He looked coldly at the green-robed figure in the middle and said coldly, "Why are you still talking to him? Let's kill him first." A cold-looking young man from the Owl clan walked out and said. Prince Yen ignored him. He looked at the girl behind him and asked calmly, "Ah man, are you afraid?" "No." Ah man shook her head. Then, she looked at the red-robed Buddha in front of her and whispered unhappily, "Bald donkey." "Ha!" Prince Yen chuckled. He waved his hand and the sword rack flew in front of him. He held the green and red swords with both hands and pulled them out. He replied, "Don't learn bad things from that guy." Everyone present was at least a fourth tribulation Khanate cultivator. How could they not hear the curse? Murderous intent flashed in the red-robed Buddha's eyes. He swung his Buddhist commandment blade, bypassing Prince Yen and rushing towards Man Klang. The sound of swords and sabers colliding rang out. The green sword blocked the Buddhist commandment blade and changed its momentum, pushing the red-robed Buddha away. "If anyone dares to touch her again, I won't let them live," Prince Yen said coldly. "Arrogant." The young man from the Owl clan snorted coldly. His figure flashed like an eagle, and his 3 fingers clawed at man. Prince Yan's eyes finally flashed with murderous intent. The aura of the 2 swords changed abruptly. His black hair fell apart and danced in the wind. An unprecedented pressure spread out. The legend of the Great Xia dynasty showed his murderous body for the first time. He was no longer calm. His killing intent overflowed. The moment he swung his sword, his fingers flew and blood splattered. A peak 5th tribulation cultivator was killed in one move, shocking everyone present. Kill! The red-robed Buddha's expression darkened. He swung his blade and the unique aura of the 3 disasters rose, cutting through the night. The Shao clan, the Yen clan, and the Roan clan, the 3 top powerhouses, worked together at the same time. Their palms opened the 9 heavens, and their halberds fell to the yellow springs. The rest of the powerhouses also joined forces to kill the two people in front of them. The Buddhists, the three races, 4 of the 3 disasters and dozens of Khanate realm experts formed an extremely powerful lineup. Their auras merged together and sealed off the entire area. Qing Hong brandished her sword, sending out a wave of brilliant killing light. The 4 experts of the 3 disasters immediately felt a powerful pressure. The unstoppable sword light was like the sickle of the Grim Reaper under the moonlight. There was only death. Broken soldiers broke souls and blood splattered everywhere. The legend of Grand Xia showed his most terrifying side. His sword was merciless. The yellow springs opened the way and the netherworld welcomed the enemy. Fresh blood splattered on the sword, blooming like a waterfall. The legend of Grand Xia had revealed his killing intent. His black hair danced in the wind, and his sword aura was murderous. In an instant, another figure died under his sword. At that moment, a black ancient bow was drawn from the Zhao family's camp behind Prince Yan. Horrifying chi flowed in the air. Dark blue light gathered together and formed an extremely horrifying arrow. It tore through the air. The moment the arrow shot out, the space trembled. Qing Hong sensed it and the sword aura spread out. The legend of Xia leaned to the side and the arrow brushed past his shoulder. Strands of black hair fell to the ground. "You are already dead." Prince Yan's eyes turned cold. He waved his hand and the sand sword and Zhiga spear flew out. The green and red swords left his hands and turned into shooting stars that shot into the sky. For swords move the world, heaven and earth fall together. It was a move that appeared for the first time in the mortal world. The 4 swords shook the 4 directions and fell down with a loud bang. Heaven and earth collapsed along with it. The collapsed void brought about a series of pitch-black ravines. Blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. After the terrifying strike, the nearest dozen inborn experts were all sent flying. In the Zhao family's camp, blood and bones splattered everywhere. The man with the bow spurted blood all over his body like rain. He fell powerlessly to the ground, blood gushing out from his mouth. The horrifying scene shocked everyone. The leaders of the 3 families landed on the ground and vomited blood. They barely managed to stabilize themselves. Looking at the miserable scene in front of them, they were shocked and couldn't believe it. The Zhao family will, the man in the purple robe with the bow lost his spirit. He didn't have time to finish his sentence. The Zhao family that dominated the 4 states finally tasted the most painful pain today. Retreat. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, the red-robed Buddha moved his feet and led the Buddhist behind him out of the battle. The Rong family, Xiao family, and Yan family also didn't dare to continue fighting and quickly retreated. Clang! The green, red, sand, and Zhiga spear returned to their sheaths and landed on the sword rack. Prince Yan withdrew his killing intent and looked at the girl beside him. He said calmly, "Let's go. It's time to send the void scroll over." "Okay." Man nodded obediently. She went forward and carried the sword rack on her back and left with the former. Jiming Marquis Manor. Under the moonlight, Bai Yi looked at the moon quietly. She couldn't help but miss it. Only after tasting the warmth and coldness of the world would one know how deep it was. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. It was as if 1,000 knives had been carved into her heart, one after another. In the homeland of Western Buddha, a man looked at the words on the void scroll in front of her. Her vital energy turned into a knife and carved into her heart stroke by stroke. It was the first time someone could use the heart-carving technique after 1,000 years. They were separated by 2 planes and the news was completely blocked. No method would work. Only through 2 people who were completely connected by blood could the contents of the void scroll be transmitted to the divine great land. In front of a man, Prince Yan stood with his back to her. He was silent. The pain in his heart wasn't something that ordinary people could endure. The persistence of these 2 juniors was heartbreaking. The words were carved into their hearts. The two people who were separated by two planes were enduring great pain. However, it was only at this moment that they could feel each other's existence. Drops of blood dripped from the corners of their mouths and dyed their clothes red. This was the sudden fate of the barbarian palace. From that moment on, the two were tightly bound together. They were once young girls who didn't understand the world. They were once young boys with weak wings. When they first met, their slightly childish words were indeed the best memories in the world. The moon traveled to the west. A blood-stained heavenly book was transmitted from the homeland of Western Buddha to the divine Great Land. After the last stroke, man smiled and fainted. In the Jiming Marquis manner, Bai Yi's eyes dimmed. She walked into the study and closed the door. In Menyang country, in front of Mount Fupan where snow and cherry blossoms were falling, a dark aura descended. Looking at the snow-covered mountain pass, she turned into a stream of light and walked up. So it was here. He should have thought of it earlier. Mount Fupan, Menyang sacred mountain. Hydra was a god that Menyang country believed in. It wasn't surprising that they were hiding here. Qing Hong's figure appeared and quickly followed. In Mount Fupan, Bai Jiang walked down the mountain step by step. After the volcano stopped erupting, the dead mountain became Hydra's residence. Everywhere there was a bone-chilling aura. After walking for a long time, Bai Jiang stopped. Looking at the mountain rocks in front of him, he turned his palm and slammed it down. With a boom, the heaven and earth shook. Among the broken rocks, a strange black ball of light flew out. Before it could escape, it was caught by Bai Jiang and its spiritual consciousness was erased. Behind him, Li Luo frowned slightly. He didn't see what the ball of light was in Bai Jiang's hand. The three temple lords had different missions and had different information. Even though he was the Eternal Night Hierarch, he couldn't easily interfere with the missions of the other two temple lords. The two left one after the other. In the Jiming Marquis manner, Qing Hong's figure walked out of the study. The same face appeared in two places at the same time. The next moment, she walked out of the manor. The spies of the Eternal Night cult who had been lurking outside the manor saw the figure walking out of the manor and immediately followed. However, they lost track of the former after less than 10 miles out of the imperial city. In the academy, Qing Hong's figure appeared with a different face. It was the Jiming Marquis who was rumored to be seriously injured and dying. "Teacher, I found the no scroll," Ning Chen said solemnly in the wooden house. Hearing this, the teacher who was sorting out the ancient books paused. He raised his head and said slowly, "Go find Dao Kuei. He will guide you in cultivation. I still have something to worry about." "I hope teacher can give me some advice," Ning Chen said. "What is it?" the teacher asked. "Zi's soul is still in the central spirit region. Is there any way to get it back?" Ning Chen asked. The teacher was silent for a moment and said, "If the hierarch of the Eternal Night cult can get his weapon back, his strength can barely reach the level of the third disaster. In the central spirit region, he may be able to exchange a few blows with the 7 Ju Tian whose strength is limited. If you want to save Xia Zi's soul, this is the only way." Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. The difficulty of this matter wasn't small. Although Li Luo knew the location of the Smoky Cloud Divine Spear, he still needed to pass through the Nether King's protection. Facing an expert who was close to the peak of the three disasters, he didn't have much confidence. The central spirit region was the border between the two worlds. Yama could not reach the Divine Land, and they could not reach the world where Yama was. The central spirit region was supported by the Smoke Cloud Divine Spear, so it could only bear a limited amount of power. Yama also did not dare to send too much power. However, even so, an enemy who was close to the great perfection of the three disasters was not easy to pass. Once you master the forbidden move of the life scroll, your body and foundation will improve rapidly in a short time. This is also the fastest way to improve your strength in a short time. However, this move can be cultivated but not used. Remember, the teacher reminded him seriously. "Yes, thank you for your advice." Ning Chen nodded and bowed respectfully before leaving. Half a day later, Qing Hong returned to the Marquis mansion. In the dead of night, Li Luo appeared out of nowhere in the courtyard. The two of them, one in the light and one in the dark, sat across from each other in the academy, exchanging information. Sect Master, I have a question I've always wanted to ask. Is this the original appearance of your body? Asked Ning Chen. Of course. Li Luo took a sip of tea. Otherwise, how could I hide it from Pai Jiang? One person having two bodies. It really is inconceivable. Ning Chen sighed. Ha, it's just an incomplete copy that was passed down after the 5 regions were purged. It's long been incomplete. If you want to learn it, I can teach you. Li Luo smiled. Then thank you for your generosity, senior, said Ning Chen respectfully. Hey, don't call me senior. We're not that close. Furthermore, I can't teach you for free. You have to pay for it. Li Luo smiled. Ning Chen's lips curved. Whatever the Marquis mansion has that sect master likes, you can take. Chapter 357. Ah, besides a few girls in your mansion, you only have a single monk. What do you think you can pay? Li Luo smiled. What does religion master want? Ning Chen asked back. Heavenly tomes, Li Luo lightly said. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. With religion master's cultivation, does it matter if you have a heavenly tomes or not? Just because I don't need it doesn't mean I don't want it. 1 for 1, no one will suffer a loss. Li Luo remained unmoved. Which volume does religion master want? Ning Chen put down the tea in his hand and asked. The life volume, Li Luo calmly said. Then forget it. Ning Chen shook his head and directly refused. When Junior obtained the life volume in the past, I promised someone that I wouldn't give it to anyone else. This Junior doesn't have the fortune to cultivate religion master's cultivation method. Li Luo frowned. He picked up the tea in his cup and silently tasted it. After a long time, he looked up and said, let's change the conditions. You will give 30% of the life volume's cultivation method to Luofei, as well as the heaven volume. Ning Chen forcibly resisted the urge to throw the teacup at the former's face. Religion master, you really know how to take advantage of a burning house. You might be in a hurry, but I'm not. This is the last condition. Do you want to change it or not? Li Luo smiled. Change it. Ning Chen squeezed out a word from between clenched teeth. Li Luo casually took out a tattered jade page and tossed it over. He chuckled. Here, take it. It seems religion master has already prepared it. Ning Chen received the jade page. From the moment we met, I discovered that you were always thinking about this cultivation method. Do you really think I don't know anything? Li Luo slowly said. Ah, the older the ginger, the spicier it is. Ning Chen chuckled and casually said, religion master gave me the cultivation method first. Aren't you afraid this junior will go back on his word? I can beat several of you by myself. What am I afraid of? Li Luo's words were filled with disdain. Ning Chen was speechless. The cyan jade page was mottled and ancient. It had long been damaged beyond repair. Fortunately, the words recorded on it could still be read. Ning Chen read it for a moment and frowned. Sect master, how many years have you spent cultivating this body? Ning Chen raised his head and clenched his teeth. Li Luo sipped the tea in his cup unhurriedly and replied, it's been over 100 years. Sigh, it's been too long, I can't remember. Ning Chen didn't know what to say. It seemed that he couldn't expect the clone to have much combat power in a short period of time. Let me remind you that if the clone dies, the main body will be heavily injured and might even die with it. So before the clone has a certain amount of ability to protect itself, you must be careful, Li Luo sternly reminded. Thank you for your reminder, Sect Master, Ning Chen replied. This time, Pai Jiang went to Fu Pan Mountain and took out something unknown. In all likelihood, it is related to the 7 absolute heavens. In the near future, Pai Jiang will likely make another move. I cannot stay here for long. If there is anything, just tell Luofei. She knows how to inform me. Li Luo said. Yes. Ning Chen nodded and said, the matter of the smoke cloud divine spear still needs some time. Once the battle forces are gathered, I will inform the sect master. Li Luo nodded and stood up to bid farewell. Take care. Be careful. Take care. Ning Chen sternly said. Li Luo turned and left. The door to the study opened and Qing Hong's figure scattered, disappearing in an instant. Not long after Li Luo left, there was a knock on the door outside the study. Come in, Ning Chen replied. Luofei pushed open the door and entered. She opened the still warm tea on the table and frowned. Father came. He just left, Ning Chen honestly said. I don't want to ask about your matters. I just want to tell you that the strength of the 7 absolute heavens is not something a human can compare with. If you want to deal with him, the only way is to stop him from descending. Do not try to fight him directly, Luofei solemnly said. Ning Chen sighed inwardly. He also didn't want to face such a monster. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. Luofei, thank you for Xinu, Ning Chen earnestly said. At that time, if Luofei had told him where Xinu was, he wouldn't have been able to rescue her. He would always remember this kindness. Luofei nodded and turned to leave without saying anything else. Miss Luo, please wait. At this time, Ning Chen stood up and condensed energy with his fingers. A silver brilliance rose from his body and an extremely cold energy stirred up the ice and snow in the room. It was like winter had arrived, a beautiful sight to behold. I promised your father that I would transfer 30% of the life scrolls cultivation method to you. As his voice fell, wind and snow swirled, gathering around Luofei. In the next moment, her clothes flashed as true essence crossed Ning Chen's Qi Si and poured into her dantian. Luofei's heart shook. At this time, she didn't dare to be distracted. She revolved the Book of Moon, guiding the life scrolls cultivation method to rapidly spread out. A quarter hour later, outside the Marquis mansion, dark clouds covered the moon. A heavy pressure fell down, as if the heavens were falling. Ning Chen withdrew his hand. He looked at the dark clouds outside and said, Miss Luo, I wish you success. With the arrival of the 5th Xiantian tribulation, the entire imperial court was filled with this heavy pressure. Luofei took a step forward and quickly vanished from the room, rushing out of the imperial court. Within the study, Ning Chen waved his hand and closed the door. He looked at the jade tome in his hands, a dignified expression on his face. The cultivation method that he had lost could be restored. This avatar technique was indeed more important to him right now. With the cries of a phoenix, phoenix blood flew out. Layer after layer of blood-red light gathered together. The heavenly soul left the body and fused into the phoenix blood. Heaven, earth, and life, these 3 scrolls revolved together. True essence nourished the soul and the phoenix blood condensed into an avatar. In the end, humans were not gods, they could not create avatars out of thin air. As the avatar appeared, the aura of the main body rapidly weakened. True essence and blood vitality were rapidly consumed. Time passed day after day. For over 10 days, the Marquis mansion's study was tightly shut. No one dared to disturb him. Half a month later, Luofei walked out. She took 2 steps and vanished from sight. In the Qizhou mountain range, in the ancient land that stretched for tens of thousands of miles, Luofei appeared. Senior Dao Kuei, Ning Chen stopped and said. At this time, the earth shook and a giant crack slowly opened, swallowing Dao Kuei within. This was the second time they met. The exhaustion in Dao Kuei's eyes was even more obvious. But, there was a faint smile on his young face, as warm and gentle as ever. Senior. Ning Chen respectfully bowed. The more he learned, the more he was moved by Dao Kuei and his teacher's persistence. these two were truly selfless people. For the sake of the common people, they didn't want to suffer in the great calamity 1,000 years from now. They had waited for 1,000 years. Even the ancient sages could not compare to them. There's not much time left. Let's begin, said Jiang Wangji. Yes. Ning Chen sat down and began to circulate the life scroll. At the same time, the void scroll converged. One was life, the other was destruction. They complemented and supported each other, reinforcing and suppressing each other. Jiang Wangji waved his hand and a purple zither appeared. His fingers strummed it, and profound music began to ring out, entering Ning Chen's body. A fourth cyclone gradually appeared in Ning Chen's sea of qi. Borrowing the power of the profound music, it began to rapidly grow. You want to borrow the power of the 3 scrolls to use the life scroll's forbidden technique? Just as the 4 scrolls reached a balance, the auras of the heaven, earth, and void scrolls rapidly poured into the life scroll. The balance between life and destruction was instantly broken. Jiang Wangji sensed this and his expression was grave. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. I can help you, but you must remember that this technique can be cultivated but not used. After saying this, Jiang Wangji plucked the zither strings with his right hand. 2 ancient swords, one black and one white, flew out from the zither's body. The Taoist formation was activated, and yin and yang transformed into taiji. The swords formed a formation around the former and rotated continuously. At the same time, on the western front of Great Xia, the allied army of the 3 dynasties had gathered and launched a fierce counterattack against the Eternal Night cult. For a time, the Eternal Night army was forced to retreat again and again. With Rong Lugan and Chu Li unconscious, the Eternal Night cult only had Bai Jiang left. Even with fierce generals like Residual Wind and Hua Zhuang, it was still difficult to face the allied army of the 3 dynasties. On Great Xia's side, after Marquis Jiming's accident, the forces that had fought against the master of the 4 extreme realms were all hidden and did not participate in this war. In the Marquis's mansion, a Marquis in red robes was always in the study. Although his face was the same as Marquis Jiming's, his aura was many times weaker. The one-person double transformation technique was indeed magical. However, its weakness was also very obvious. The clone only had the appearance, and its battle strength was almost negligible. After all, not everyone could be like Li Luo, tempering his avatar for 100 years and still fighting fiercely. After all, living for a long time had its benefits. Marquis, the tea is cold. Do you want another cup? Ruoshi walked over and asked softly. No need. Ning Chen picked up the teacup. The originally cold tea immediately steamed up. Has Luofei not returned yet? Ning Chen asked. No. Ruoshi shook her head. Ning Chen frowned. After the 5th tribulation, there would be 3 disasters. However, the 3 disasters were different from the 5 tribulations. It was hard to predict when they would descend. If the 3 disasters followed after the 5th tribulation, Luofei would be in trouble. Do you need me to go take a look? Meng Xuanji walked over and asked calmly. Thank you, but be careful. Ning Chen urged. Your safety. Meng Xuanji was a bit worried. It's fine. I don't doubt the people I use. Ning Chen replied. Meng Xuanji nodded and didn't say anything else. Since he said so, she could only trust his judgment. After Meng Xuanji left, Ning Chen leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His face was full of exhaustion. What other details had he not thought of? What were the conditions for the 7 extremes to descend? Ghost origin, underworld origin, Tao origin, and 7 extremes physiques. The origins of these special physiques had already been taken away by the Eternal Night sect. Why would Bai Jiang go to Manyang country's Mount Fu Pan? The study quieted down without a trace of sound. Ruoshi's eyes flashed with a trace of unbearable pain. She stepped forward and gently massaged Ning Chen's temples. Underworld origin, Tao origin, ghost origin, Ning Chen's mind flashed over and over again. After an unknown amount of time, he suddenly stood up. Origin. At this moment, in the void temple of the Eternal Night God sect, Bai Jiang opened the Eternal Night scripture floating in the void. His eyes suddenly lit up. Found it. Chapter 358. The Eternal Night Divine Scripture floating in the air emitted a strange light. On the Divine Scripture, a picture of mountains and rivers appeared. The images reflected in it were clearly visible. So it was hiding here. Bai Jiang's eyes flashed coldly. After searching for so long, he had finally found it. Northern Meng's royal court, on the northwestern border of a strange mountain, a black aura gathered. Bai Jiang walked out, and a powerful pressure descended. All the birds and beasts on the mountain cried out in fear. A blurry, translucent figure appeared in the huge river. It let out ear-piercing shrieks. A water demon? Bai Jiang stopped, frowning slightly. An ordinary river was actually able to give birth to such a monster. It wasn't simple. The water demon had already taken human form. It looked like a woman, but its facial features were still a bit blurry. The water demon, which had just gained sentience, could clearly sense how terrifying the person in front of it was. Its shrieks were filled with terror. They were no longer on the same level. It felt like it could destroy anything. Bai Jiang stepped into the river, and the entire river collapsed. The water demon's newly formed body immediately collapsed without any resistance. It was like a god crushing an ant, cruel and simple. Bai Jiang's steps suppressed all life. No more insects or beasts dared to block his path. A moment later, mist gathered, blocking his vision. Bai Jiang sneered. It seemed it had also awakened. Dark light surged within the fog. No barrier could block it. The thick fog was instantly dispelled. Wah, wah! At this moment, a young baby's cry rang out from the depths of a strange mountain. It was heart-wrenching. The earth rumbled, and mountain rocks were sent flying. A petrified body that was like a mountain and river revived. 8 huge heads appeared, and they had the faces of infants. 4 were male and 4 were female. It was extremely terrifying. The 9 neonate had awakened. Other than the one that had died in the heavenly flame, the other 8 had all awakened. On a strange mountain, the 9 neonates shrieked. The 4 female babies opened their mouths and spat out scarlet flames at the black-robed figure in front of them. A mere beast dares to provoke me? Bai Jiang snorted and waved his hand. The black aura gathered in front of him, blocking the scarlet flames. The 9 neonate was horrified. The 4 male babies opened their mouths at the same time. Black water poured out, bringing with it a terrifying poison. Heaven's tears! Bai Jiang clenched his fist, and an ancient sword appeared in his hand. Green blood flowed about, strange and unordinary. When the sword appeared, the wind and clouds changed. It parted the mystic water and chopped off the heads of the 3 boys. With 3 loud bangs, the heads fell to the ground, causing dust and sand to fill the sky. The gushing blood dyed the heavenly tears of jade blood red. Blood rain fell from the sky, poignant and beautiful. Absolute suppression. There was no doubt about it. Jiao, who had hidden for tens of thousands of years, could not escape the fate of being slaughtered in the end. The cries of an infant resounded through Alienation Mountain. It was so sorrowful, but it was completely useless. The bloody tears of heaven was sharp and merciless. It drew a cold, murderous light as heads fell one after another. In front of the powerful head of the martial crown, the 9-headed neonate that had lived for tens of thousands of years did not have much ability to resist. It walked step by step into the road to the underworld. The strength of humans would forever be the nightmare of other living beings. Even if other living beings cultivated bitterly for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, they would still be unable to achieve the same level of strength as humans. Blood flowed out of the devastated Alienation Mountain, dyeing half of the mountain red. The nine-headed neonate fell into a pool of blood, no longer making a sound. Bai Jiang raised his hand. A black and red ball of light flew out of the nine-headed neonate and slowly fell. Not far away, Li Luo appeared. Seeing this scene, his eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he rushed forward and grabbed the falling ball of light. Bai Jiang's eyes turned cold. His feet moved and blocked in front of him. Heaven's tears of heaven slashed down, filling the sky with green blood light. Li Luo twisted his body and avoided the sword light. He wanted to grab the ball of light again, but it was already too late. Do you really think I am not prepared at all? Bai Jiang waved his hand and put away the origin of the nine-headed neonate. He looked at the person in front of him and said coldly. Such an unfamiliar expert had suddenly appeared in the world, and he was even related to the Jiming Marquis. How could he not be on guard? Since it is like this, then let me see how much you have improved. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Luo's body moved, his blade unsheathed. The beauty of his blade shocked the heavens and earth. It was a completely unfamiliar martial art. His blade was slow, but it was fast, causing people's minds to be in chaos. Bai Jiang turned over his palm to block the blade. With a king sound, the black aura scattered in all directions. Bai Jiang's crimson blood tears streaked across the sky, dazzling the eyes with green light. Li Luo was as immovable as a mountain. His sword finger shook the heavens, and with a bang, a huge crack appeared between the two of them. The two experts who were the closest to the third innate calamity in the world met once more at northern Mengshunli Mountain. Saber light and sword light constantly clashed. Life and death only existed in an instant. Estrangement Mountain, which was already riddled with holes, suffered another calamity. Large chunks of rock collapsed and fell down. The terror of the cultivators on the peak was on full display at this moment. At the same time, to the east of the Grand Xia, thousands of miles of wilderness, Madame Luofei had just crossed her fifth tribulation and was now facing the greatest tribulation of her life. Not long after the fifth tribulation passed, the great tribulation of the three disasters arrived. The Eternal Night sect girl was gradually running out of strength, and was now surrounded by perils. As the ghost palanquin arrived, a red-clothed knowing destiny stepped out. As he looked at Luofei in the great tribulation, he frowned. What do we do? Meng Xuanji asked with a dignified expression. Heavenly tribulation couldn't be interfered with, otherwise the one who did would attract a heavenly tribulation of the same level or even higher. She only knew that the man beside her had once blocked heavenly tribulation, but in this situation, Ningchen frowned, a light constantly jumping in his eyes. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to block the great tribulation of the three disasters. Let's go back. Ningchen calmly said. He turned and entered the palanquin. The ghost palanquin sped away, rushing towards the Marquis mansion. Within the Marquis mansion, within a stone room, Ningchen walked over. He looked at the figure trapped beneath the Solomon sword and said, "Something has happened to Luofei. In Milky Flower Plains, only you can save her." Beneath the Buddhist sword, the demonic cultivator opened his eyes. He coldly said, "You should know what will happen to you if you release me." Ningchen didn't answer. He glanced at Bodhi behind him and calmly said, "Senior, I'll have to trouble you. Have you thought this through?" Bodhi sternly asked. Ningchen nodded. Right now, no accidents could happen to his alliance with the Eternal Night Churchmaster. He had promised Luofei's safety, so he had to keep his word. Bodhi sighed and didn't say anything else. He twisted his fingers and the Solomon sword returned to its scabbard. The stone room's seal dissipated. The demonic cultivator moved, his demonic might shaking the heavens. Bodhi took a step forward and struck out with a palm, blocking the demonic cultivator's palm. This palm can be considered a greeting. Cherish your last moments, my good friend. The cold voice didn't contain the slightest emotion. The demonic cultivator passed by. Calling him a good friend was even more ironic. The demonic cultivator waved his hand and the demonic sword suppressed beneath the stone room flew out. In the next moment, the demonic chi scattered and the demonic cultivator vanished from sight. I hope you won't regret today's decision in the future. Bodhi looked at the departing demonic cultivator with a dignified expression. Even in the homeland of Western Buddhism, this person was an absolute chosen of heaven. If such a person were to fall into the demonic path, the calamity he would bring about would be unimaginable. East of the Grand Xia, above the milky flower plains, the demonic chi condensed. His robes fluttered in the wind as he walked step by step into the three calamities. Within the tribulation sea, Luofei vomited a mouthful of blood and staggered. She had already reached her limit. It's you. When Luofei saw the figure walking over, her consciousness relaxed and she directly fainted. The demonic cultivator caught her falling figure. With a slash of his sword, he cut apart the karmic flames surging towards him and walked out. The heavens sensed this and their fury soared. The formless karmic flames transformed into tangible black flames that could burn the heavens and boil the seas. Demonic sword, bury the heavens. The demonic sword moved and the demonic chi surged. Layers of sword chi appeared and soared into the heavens. The bury the heavens sword slashed down from the 9 heavens. Rumbling sounds rang out from the horizon. Karmic flames and demonic chi collided. The sky changed color and a heavy pressure fell down, causing the wasteland within 100 miles to violently sway. The demonic cultivator resisted the heavens and reached the most white-hot stage. With his sword in hand, the karmic flames that filled the sky found it difficult to descend. Heavy demonic essence rippled between the heavens and earth. Endless karmic flames spread throughout the world. At this moment, even the void began to burn. At the same time, an intense battle had already continued for an unknown period of time. With the power of the Nether Kings supporting him, Bai Zhang's cultivation wasn't weaker than anyone else's. With his sword in hand, he was extremely powerful. On the other hand, Li Luo was only an avatar. In the end, his strength was inferior to his main body. Because of this, he wasn't able to gain the upper hand. Saber and sword slashed across each other, causing a bloody light to shine. On the other side, faint traces of black energy began to scatter from the wound. Blue Blood Heaven Tears was one of the most famous swords of the divine religion, on par with the demon sword Samsara. In Bai Zhang's hands, its power was even more terrifying. Retreat. Seeing that Bai Zhang was no longer the same as before, Li Luo didn't want to continue fighting. He pushed away Bai Zhang with his saber and quickly retreated from the battle. Bai Zhang coldly snorted and didn't chase after him. The difference in strength between them wasn't too great, so there wasn't much meaning in chasing after him. Li Luo appeared at the Marquis mansion. Looking at the red-robed figure waiting in the courtyard, his eyes narrowed. It really was an avatar. Where had this brat's main body run off to? Lord Religion Master, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Ning Chen said. What is it? As his voice fell, Li Luo suddenly frowned. He swept his spiritual sense around and asked, where is Luofei? She's crossing tribulation. She should be back soon. Ning Chen replied. Before his voice fell, a devilish mist descended from the void. A white-haired figure in black robes walked out, holding the unconscious Luofei in her arms. With a wave of her hand, she flew down and landed in the Marquis mansion. Li Luo caught Luofei. Looking at the figure standing in the air, a light flashed in his eyes. I've rescued her. I look forward to seeing her again. I hope your sword doesn't disappoint me. The devilish mist dispersed and the demonic cultivator left. The skies above the Marquis mansion returned to calm. However, the hearts of those present grew even heavier. Miss Ruoshi, I'll have to trouble you. Li Luo carried Luofei into the room. He looked at the woman standing behind Ning Chen and sternly said. This is what Ruoshi should do. Ruoshi softly replied. Boy, if you don't cherish such a good girl, it'll be too late to regret it in the future. Li Luo glanced at the young man in front of Ruoshi, his expression unprecedentedly solemn. Chapter 359. The cold autumn wind blew in the north. The ghost palanquin drove out of the Heaven's Gate and headed towards the northern Meng imperial court. On the palanquin, opposite Meng Xuanji, the red-robed Marquis Jiming closed his eyes. The drowsiness from not having rested for days flooded him. After all, the doppelganger was not as good as the main body. It had not reached the Khanate realm and could not hold on for long. When the moon was high up in the sky, Ningchen walked out of the palanquin on the alienated mountain. Looking at the collapsed mountain, his eyes flickered. The river that stretched for hundreds of miles was destroyed by the powerful power of the underworld king. The river had collapsed and the water from the source washed over the broken mountain. Meng Xuanji followed behind him quietly. Her beautiful eyes were filled with unconcealable shock. No matter how many times she felt it, this kind of power that surpassed the mortal level would make people feel despair. The power of the underworld king was already so terrifying with the help of Bai Jiang. If the underworld king himself came, there would be no hope for the world. As they walked, Ningchen suddenly stopped. He looked at the girl behind him and said, "Do you hear something?" Meng Xuanji came back to her senses and spread out her spiritual consciousness. She nodded and said, "It's in the west. It's very weak." Ningchen changed his direction and walked towards the west. At a section where the river stopped flowing, there was a blurry human-shaped watery light that was constantly trembling. The mournful cries sounded like the weeping of a woman. The river was about to run out. The blurred water figure was getting weaker and weaker. The water demon that was shattered by Bai Jiang was about to disappear. Ningchen looked at the water demon before him and sighed softly in his heart. This was already the second time they met. The first time, he spared her life. He didn't expect that this time, the miracle of life in this world wouldn't be able to escape this calamity. The water demon seemed to recognize the human in front of her. Her illusory body knelt down and begged. She was instinctively afraid of death. Even demons that had just gained intelligence were no exception. To save or not to save, it was often a matter of a strong person's thoughts. To the water demon, the human in front of her was undoubtedly a strong person. But to Ningchen, whether he saved or not did not matter much. It was just a matter of whether he was willing to lift his hand. The cruelty of the human world was vividly displayed at this moment. In the end, for some unknown reason, Ningchen still made a move. He lifted his right hand and a drop of blood dripped down from his finger, fusing into the water monster's body. In an instant, the powerful vitality of the phoenix blood erupted and quickly gathered the water monster's body that was about to dissipate. "Miss Meng," Ningchen said. Meng Xuanji nodded. With a wave of her hand, the golden feather centipede flew out, leaving a dazzling streak of golden light in the sky. Amidst the rumbling sounds of breaking, a several thousand-foot-long ravine appeared on Alienation Mountain, reconnecting the destroyed river channel. At the source of the great river, the water flowed down along the newly opened channel downstream. "Let's go," Ningchen called out, then continued walking towards the depths of Alienation Mountain. Meng Xuanji followed him. Before she left, she glanced at the water demons that had gathered together and left without looking back. Behind him, the water demon knelt down and thanked him. Her shrill voice sounded very pleasant to the ear. Perhaps many years later, neither of them would remember that they had saved a dying aquatic spirit creature back in Estrangement Mountain. However, that was a small favor, but to that aquatic spirit creature, it was indeed a memory and a favor that she would never forget for the rest of her life. In the depths of Alienation Mountain, the remnants of the great battle could still be seen clearly. His red robes danced in the wind. Ningchen looked at the tragic aftermath of the battle and walked step by step on the pool of blood. The nine-headed snakelet was dead. Its entire body had been cut into dozens of pieces. The black-red ball of light that Li Luo had mentioned should be the source of the nine-headed snakelet. Based on this, it was very likely that the source of the eight-headed snakelet was the source of the eight-headed snakelet. From the looks of it, the descent of the seven absolutes heavens required these legendary beasts to be part of the process. Since the conditions for the advent of the underworld king had been determined, then Bai Zhang's role would end here. The next step was very clear. Kill by Jiang and by time. Although the Underworld King could increase a person's strength, there should be a limit. Getting rid of Bai Jiang was the most effective way to delay the advent of the Underworld King. 15 minutes later, the ghost palanquin left Alienation Mountain and rushed toward Heavenly Lake. Bai Jiang's current strength was not weaker than the Eternal Night Hierarchs. It would not be easy to get rid of him. He had to gather as much power as possible. This was also his main goal. Heavenly Lake was filled with a cold aura. There was no one there. The ghost palanquin stopped and Ning Chen walked out. Just as he was about to go forward, a sword blocked his path. Jiming Marquis, you've come to the wrong place, said Si Mingjian calmly as he looked at the red-robed youth. I've come to pay a visit to the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor, said Ning Chen sincerely. Master hasn't returned yet, said Si Mingjian. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. Hasn't returned yet? Could the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor still be in the Four Extremities realm? Many thanks. Ning Chen thanked him and turned to enter the palanquin, leaving with it. There was no need for Si Mingjian to lie. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor should still be in the Four Extremities realm. This old man was truly obsessed with the phoenix blood. Ning Chen had just returned to the Marquis Manor when he received a secret report. Chu Li had awakened and had appeared on the western battlefield to help the Evernight army block the advance of the three dynasties. Sect Master, take a look for yourself. Ning Chen handed over the secret report with a cold glint in his eyes. Li Luo sighed heavily after reading the report. Although he had a good relationship with Chu Li, she was still one of the three martial crowns. Her loyalty to the Nether King was not something anyone could change. He had originally thought that Chu Li would be able to avoid a direct confrontation by keeping her unconscious, but she had still awakened. It seemed the Nether King's power to descend upon the divine continent was growing stronger and stronger. Even the restrictions he and the Jiming Marquis had set up together were unable to block it. I will personally deal with Chu Li's matter. You cannot attack her. That is also my bottom line, said Li Luo. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. A dangerous aura pulsed within them, but it soon disappeared. Sect Master, I don't wish to see Chu Li become a second Bai Jiang, said Ning Chen slowly. They had finally gained the upper hand in the war against the Eternal Night cult. If a second Bai Jiang were to appear, the situation would immediately reverse. Most importantly, the matter of stopping the Nether King's descent was imminent. They could not afford any more variables. Li Luo did not wish to harm their relationship on this matter, so he changed the topic. How did this trip go? Did you manage to invite the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor? No. Ning Chen shook his head. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor has yet to return from the Four Extremities realm. We can't count on him for the time being. How about we switch to the Abbot of the Crossing E Temple? He's too slow. It's not suitable. Li Luo immediately rejected. The Buddha in the mortal world could resist, but he was too slow. If they wanted to trap Bai Jiang, this would become a loophole. What about your main body? When will it return? Asked Li Luo with a frown. I'm not sure, but it should take a few more days. There's no time to wait, replied Ning Chen. Report. At this moment, another urgent report came from outside the Marquis Manor's backyard. A red-clothed guard from the Supreme Court knelt outside the courtyard with an urgent secret report in his hand. Ning Chen's eyes flickered. With a wave of his hand, the secret report flew into his hand. After reading it, Knowing Destiny's expression immediately darkened. The secret report came from the spy he had planted in Ascension Valley. The content was not complicated. Bai Jiang had gone to the Four Extremities realm through a spatial passage. After the master of the Four Extremities realm and Xian Ji were defeated, he had specially borrowed a Xiantian expert from the brave Marquis and hidden outside Ascension Valley. He had originally wanted to guard against the Four Extremities realm, but he had not expected to be used today. The black-clothed expert from the Three Disasters realm was undoubtedly Bai Jiang. This time, it was troublesome. Bai Jiang's purpose in going to the Four Extremities realm was obvious. The Eternal Night cult had a short alliance with the Master of the Four Extremities realm, so his understanding of the Four Extremities realm was no less than Ning Chen's. The Divine Continent had desolate beasts, but so did the Four Extremities realm. Their whereabouts were even clearer. The Phoenix of Feng Chi Mountain was already a secret that everyone knew. Sect Master, we have to go to the Four Extremities realm, said Ning Chen gravely as he handed over the secret report. Li Luo's expression also changed when he saw the report. They had only been concerned with the situation in the Divine Continent and had neglected the Four Extremities realm. We can't wait any longer. Let's move out immediately, said Li Luo. The Phoenix's level was different from Jiuying and Octahead. If Bai Jiang obtained it, the Nether King's descent would very likely become a reality. At that time, it would be too late. Fortunately, there was a chaotic flow of space at the end of the passage between the Divine Continent and the Four Extremities realm. It could buy them some time. Now, it was a competition to see who was faster. Miss Meng, I'll leave the safety of the Marquis estate to you, said Ning Chen as he walked in front of Meng Xuanji. Meng Xuanji frowned and transmitted, don't you need me to go with you? Ning Chen shook his head and transmitted back, there's no need. With Senior Sword Bodhi here, there's no need to worry about my safety. I'll leave a letter for the western battlefield. If Chu Li attacks again, I hope Miss Meng can cooperate with Senior Marquis Triumph to capture him. However, don't take his life for now. Meng Xuanji nodded. Ning Chen returned to his study and wrote a letter. He placed it under his imperial seal and then walked out of the study. Seeing Li Luo and Sword Bodhi waiting outside, he said, let's go. The three of them immediately moved, heading towards Ascension Valley in the east of the Grand Xia. At the same time, a black-robed figure walked through the chaotic flow of space below the Four Extremities realm. A black aura surged, and the unique pressure of the Nether King spread out in waves. His speed was unbelievable. Half a day later, the three figures also appeared in the chaotic flow of space. Sword Bodhi's Seras staff shone with a golden light as he protected the red-robed youth beside him. Li Luo circulated her body, and powerful true essence overflowed, increasing her speed as much as possible. No one dared to be careless in this battle of speed. Although the Phoenix had the fastest speed, no one knew if it could avoid this calamity when facing Bai Jiang, who had the power of the Nether King. No matter what, the Nether King could not descend. Otherwise, all hope would be completely destroyed. In the end, it was impossible for humans to defeat gods. The disaster 30,000 years ago was a bloody lesson. Chapter 360. Time flew by outside the chaotic streams of space. Within the chaotic streams of space, time stagnated and was difficult to sense. In the blink of an eye, 10 days passed. Bai Jiang, who had entered the chaotic streams of space first, was still one step ahead of everyone else. He appeared in the southeastern region of the Four Extremes. At the intersection of the western and southern borders, outside the 100,000 Great Mountains, Bai Jiang sped over without stopping at all and rushed into the mountain range. In the depths of the mountain range, a blood-red maple forest appeared. The legendary Phoenix Perch Mountain was right in front of him. Bai Jiang withdrew his aura and descended from the sky. Phoenixes were different from other vicious beasts. They controlled the speed of heaven and earth. Wanting to obtain a phoenix origin wasn't easy. Even he had to be careful. Just as Bai Jiang arrived at Phoenix Perch Mountain, Li Luo and the other two also walked out of the chaotic streams of space and appeared in the northwestern region of the Four Extremes. Ning Chen confirmed their position and immediately brought the two of them to the 100,000 Mountains. At Phoenix Perch Mountain, a pair of phoenixes cried out and flames surged. In front of the phoenixes was a miserable figure holding a golden staff. He had already fought with the two phoenixes for several days. However, just like before, it was difficult for him to win. Phoenix flames burned the sky, creating a beautiful scene. The golden staff imperial teacher blocked with his staff, but he was forced back several steps. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Although he wasn't heavily injured, he was still in pain. Just as the man and the two phoenixes were fighting, a black aura rapidly spread out in the battlefield. A black-robed figure walked over with a powerful pressure, shocking everyone. "How about we work together? After killing the phoenixes, we'll split the benefits equally," said Bai Jiang calmly. The golden staff imperial teacher's heart sank. He coldly said, "No need. We'll fight for it with our own ability." The person in front of him was stronger than the previous master of the four extremes. He wasn't stupid enough to ask a tiger for its skin. Bai Jiang sneered and no longer paid attention to him. He waved his hand and the blood jade tears heavens appeared. With a slash of his sword, the phoenix flames rapidly scattered. The phoenixes sensed the strength of the human in front of them and cried out. The flames around them turned from red to deep blue and crazily surged out. A pointless struggle. Bai Jiang flipped his left palm and the power of the Nether King surged out of his body. A heavy pressure reverberated through heaven and earth. The phoenix true fire couldn't approach him at all. A black figure flashed past. Green blood tears, green light illuminated the world. The instant the sword appeared, the space trembled. 100 zhang long ravine split open. The two phoenixes hurriedly dodged, but their enormous bodies couldn't completely dodge. Blood gushed out. A terrifying sword wound appeared on one of the phoenix's abdomen, so deep that bone could be seen. The golden staff imperial preceptor's eyes flickered. His figure flashed rapidly, wanting to collect the phoenix blood that was spilling out. Just as he was about to do so, the phoenix blood that was gushing out suddenly burst into flames. In the blink of an eye, it dissipated into nothingness. "Fuck off." Seeing that the golden staff imperial tutor was in the way, Bai Jiang's eyes turned cold. He slashed out with his sword, and a blue blood mark tore through space and reached the imperial tutor's chest. The golden staff imperial advisor's heart trembled violently. He waved his golden staff to block the sword light. With a loud bang, the golden staff imperial preceptor was sent flying more than 30 meters away. Blood continuously flowed from his hands. With just one move, he had already suffered serious injuries. The absolute suppression of strength did not allow the weak to be on the same path. The golden staff imperial advisor suppressed his anger and retreated from the battle. He knew very well that he had no chance of winning against such a strong opponent. Suddenly, the golden staff imperial preceptor's eyes shook. He looked to the north. Why had that brat returned? In the distance, Ning Chen was holding the golden staff imperial preceptor's golden staff imperial preceptor had given him back then. He was constantly pouring his true essence into it, trying to contact the latter. Soon, the golden staff imperial preceptor responded to Ning Chen's call by releasing his aura. He really is there. Ning Chen looked in the direction of the 100,000 mountains. Was this old man really planning to deal with the two phoenixes by himself? On Phoenix Perch Mountain, Bai Jiang was facing the two phoenixes. The overwhelming battle had caused the two phoenixes' injuries to become more and more serious. The wounds that had been cut by the crimson blood heaven's tears still had some remnant energy that prevented them from recovering. The two phoenixes cried out in grief. They had no choice but to abandon their resting place and quickly rush out of the 100,000 mountains. You want to escape? Do you think it's that easy? Bai Jiang snorted coldly. He opened his hands, and black chains appeared. They trapped the sky and locked down the earth, forming a huge net that sealed off the surrounding area. Within the crisscrossing black chains, the two phoenixes' path was blocked. Phoenix cries resounded throughout the world. It was the end of the phoenixes, and it was difficult to find a way out. At this moment, one of the phoenixes let out a cry and burned its own body, using its flame of life to open a path for the other phoenixes to escape. The golden flames were unstoppable. Even the black chains could not stop them. They shattered one after another, and a path appeared in front of them. It was the only path that led to hope. The other phoenix's eyes were filled with grief. It could feel its companion's vitality rapidly declining. It cried out in grief, shaking heaven and earth. "None of you can escape." Bai Zhang's figure shot out. Crimson blood heaven's tears tore through the void and slashed at the two phoenixes. One of the phoenixes that had burned its own life spread its wings and blocked the crimson blood heaven's tears. It cried out, urging its companion to escape. With a loud bang, the crimson blood heaven's tears gushed out. In the next moment, the golden flames spread. In the final moments of its life, it wanted to drag the humans in front of it to the yellow springs. The crimson blood heaven's tears cut open the phoenix's body. Bai Jiang raised his hand and stabbed it into the phoenix's chest. In front of absolute power, any struggle was powerless. Its final cry was filled with endless regret and resentment. Its flame of life burned away all traces of the phoenix's existence, but it was unable to do anything to the humans within. After being trapped for 10,000 years and then suffering a great calamity, the phoenix's lives had been filled with ups and downs. Seeing its companion die, the other phoenix was filled with grief and fury. Just as it was about to charge out, the black chains reconnected, sealing its path. "I said none of you can escape." Bai Zhang's figure flickered and he appeared on top of the phoenixes. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he slammed his palm into the phoenix's chest. With a bang, the phoenixes were heavily injured. They fell from the sky and smashed into the ground, kicking up dust. Bai Jiang followed, slashing down with his sword, wanting to end the phoenixes' lives. But at this moment, the battle changed. The Suo Luo sword slashed through the chains and blocked the crimson blood heaven. The two swords collided, and sword chi flew everywhere. Then four figures walked over. Ning Chen looked at the destroyed Phoenix Perch Mountain and his heart sank. Had they still come too late? "Marquis Jiming, you actually didn't die." Bai Jiang couldn't hide his killing intent as he looked at the red-robed youth. "Before I send you to hell, of course I'll live well," said Ning Chen calmly. Their daos were different, and they didn't want to talk too much. Two figures shot out from Ning Chen's side. Sword and saber light cut through the darkness as they shot toward Bai Jiang. Bai Jiang raised his sword to block, his Nether King aura reaching its peak. Sword and saber light collided in the blink of an eye, shaking the heavens. The battle instantly reached a white-hot level. Sword and saber intersected, and life and death were only a hair's breadth away. Jiming hadn't attacked yet, and Bai Jiang had many misgivings when he attacked. Adding on the fact that he was fighting 1 against 2, it was difficult for him to gain the upper hand. Blue blood tears heaven's tears kept ringing, dancing in the sword and saber light. Rays of killing intent scattered in all directions, creating bottomless ravines on the ground. On Phoenix Perch Mountain, the parasol tree fell, unable to withstand the waves of the battle. A faint light flashed through the dying phoenix's eyes. There was sadness, hatred, and relief. After hiding for tens of thousands of years, it finally didn't have to hide anymore. The mournful cry was a call to its companions. "Wait for me on the road to the underworld." The next moment, golden flames burned around the phoenix. The phoenix was proud all its life. Even if it died, it wouldn't let a human desecrate its body. Looking at the phoenix in the golden flames, Ning Chen's eyes showed a trace of sadness. They had once fought side by side, and he didn't expect that they would meet again at the moment of life and death. The phoenix origin flew out and flew toward the only human recognized by the phoenix. Together with the phoenix origin, it entered Ning Chen's body with the last trust of its life. In the battle, Bai Zhang's expression changed slightly. He pushed away the Bodhi in front of him with his sword and was about to take the phoenix origin. However, the saber had already arrived and blocked his path. "Farewell, human." The phoenix's last consciousness gradually dissipated. Its life was over. At this moment, a golden pillar of light shot into the sky. All the Xiantian experts in the 4 extremes looked toward Phoenix Perch Mountain. What was going on? Bai Zhang's pupils shrank. Xiantian tribulation. How could it be? Marquis Jiming was already a Xiantian expert. How could such a phenomenon appear again? With the phoenix origin in his body, his clone rushed to the Xiantian realm. Ning Chen wanted to use the Chaos Scroll to hide his aura, but it was too late. He focused on dealing with the Sky Demon tribulation. Senior Golden Staff, please protect me. I'll be eternally grateful. Ning Chen glanced at the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor and said calmly. At this time, the Golden Staff Imperial Tutor also recovered from his shock. His expression changed again and again, but he still nodded and agreed to the former's request. Black demonic chi rushed down from the golden pillar of light. At the same time, a sea of fire burned in the sky, illuminating the sun. Two tribulations in the sky rose endlessly on Phoenix Perch Mountain. The terrifying power shocked the entire four extremes. Retreat! As the heavenly fire fell, everyone in the battle quickly retreated. They didn't want to be affected by the Xiantian tribulation. There was a gap in the siege. Bai Jiang took the opportunity to swing his sword. A green sword light flashed and swept toward Ning Chen. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor's golden staff rang. The staff gathered energy and blocked the sword light. A pool of blood spilled on the ground. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor was heavily injured again. He looked back at the young man who was going through the tribulation. His eyes darkened. This time, he hoped he made the right decision. The two experts who came with this kid were not simple. Moreover, there was a big problem with this kid's body. The Golden Staff Imperial Tutor was a smart man. He knew what was best for him. The Marquis Jiming was no longer the junior he could bully. Giving him a favor was the best choice. In the golden pillar of light, the sky demon heavenly fire burned Ning Chen. The cry of the phoenix resounded through the sky. An illusory phoenix shadow appeared behind Ning Chen. A strong power swept out. From the ghost palanquin behind, the purple gold Yama divine sword flew out and fell into Jiming's hand. The Yama divine sword was sharpened again. The heavy phoenix origin gathered on the sword. In an instant, the blood-red light shone brightly with a trace of dazzling gold. The moment the sword came out, it changed the wind and clouds and created a sea of fire. Chapter 361. The heavenly fire opened and red clothes appeared. Ning Zhang's figure instantly appeared in the middle of the battle. His divine weapon appeared and his sword pierced through the air. The sudden sword was so fast that no one could react to it. It was out of everyone's expectations. Before they could react, the sword had already entered their body. Ugh! The sword entered 3 inches and black chi gushed out. Bai Jiang endured the pain in his chest and sent out a palm strike. Vigorous True Yuan surged and pressed towards Ning Jiang. Bodhi condensed a seal and received the palm strike. The shockwaves shook the surroundings. In that instant, red clothes retreated, avoiding the shockwaves that scattered in all directions. Knowing destiny, Marquis, you've become weak. Bai Jiang suppressed the injury in his chest and looked at the red-clothed youth in front of him. It's enough to deal with you. Ning Chen's figure moved again. His sword cut through the wind and clouds. Red clothes left behind afterimages as he rushed forward again. Bai Jiang's pupils shrank. So fast. The speed in the blink of an eye exceeded the limit of the physical body. Traces of blood flowed out of Ning Chen's body. It was the backlash of the physical body not being able to keep up with the speed. Knowing destiny had grasped the Phoenix origin and at the same time had inherited the Phoenix extreme speed. However, the human body was not as strong as the Phoenix body. Under the extreme speed that exceeded one's cultivation, one had to bear the backlash. The tip of the sword drew a brilliant red light across Fengqi Mountain. It was so fast that it was shocking. Seeing this, Bodhi and Li Luo joined forces to suppress Bai Jiang's Nether King power. Together with knowing destiny, they killed Wu Guan. 2 blocked the attack and 1 took the life. The three cooperated in an orderly manner. Bai Zhang's situation immediately became dangerous. The Phoenix body's cultivation foundation was not as good as the main body's. It could not take the Nether King's power head-on. However, with the protection of the two, there was no need to worry about the rear. A purple-gold sword shone brightly with bloody light. The tip of the sword was endless. Bai Zhang's move was suppressed. Red clothes swept past and blood splashed out, dyeing the maple leaves in the sky red. 3 against 1, the strongest combination. There was no gap between them. The sword light flowed and the road to the underworld appeared. Ugh! Suddenly, the Nether King's sword pierced through Bai Zhang's body. Blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. His aura shook violently and the black light kept extinguishing. Nether descends, heaven's tears. Suffering another heavy blow, Bai Zhang took half a step back. At the moment of life and death, a dark aura as heavy as a bottomless abyss gushed out. Suddenly, the heavens and earth lost their balance, and the whole Feng Qi mountain shook. A terrifying pressure descended. The Nether King opened his eyes, and his aura changed. His dark and cold eyes were devoid of any human emotions. Just a glance was enough to cause the three people in front of him to feel as if they had been severely injured. Their hearts throbbed violently. "Human, step back." His words were calm and emotionless. A terrifying aura spread out, and the three of them were immediately sent flying. Their blood dyed the sand red. Strong, indescribably strong. The Nether King moved, a black light flashed, instantly appearing in front of Li Luo. With a flip of his palm, an endless amount of black qi gathered. With a bang, heaven and earth trembled. Li Luo's eyes narrowed as he raised his saber to block the attack. However, a loud bang was heard as the saber shattered into pieces. A red and green figure flew out, blood splattering all over the sky. "Next, you!" Nether King Ha raised his hand. Raging winds and raging mists surged with divine might, sweeping towards Bodhi who was standing not far away. Jian Bodhi's expression froze. Buddhist light flickered, and his Buddhist energy soared to meet the Nether King's divine might. With a loud bang, Bodhi was forced back a dozen steps. Blood splashed out of his mouth, dyeing his clothes red. In just a breath's time, the situation had rapidly reversed. The Nether King who had borrowed Bai Zhang's body to descend was shockingly powerful. Retreat! Ning Chen recovered and suppressed his shock. His red robes flickered as he brought the heavily injured Li Luo and Jian Bodhi away. Outside the battle, the Golden Staff Imperial Teacher didn't dare stay for even half a moment. His feet moved, and he also left. Looking at the four of them leaving, the Nether King's eyes flashed with a cold light. In the next moment, his terrifying pressure scattered, and he returned to his original appearance. "Many thanks for saving us, Master." Bai Zhang suppressed his injuries and respectfully said, "Your body is no longer capable of withstanding my power. Quickly bring back the Phoenix origin and prepare the final extreme sky formation." The Nether King's voice echoed between heaven and earth. "Yes," replied Bai Zhang. To the southwest of the 100,000 mountains, Ning Chen appeared with the heavily injured Jian Bodhi and Li Luo. The Golden Staff Imperial Teacher followed behind them. Because he had received several of Bai Zhang's attacks, his injuries weren't light. "Seniors, please focus on healing your injuries. Junior will stand guard on the side," said Ning Chen. Li Luo and Jian Bodhi nodded. They didn't say anything and immediately sat down to focus on healing. Although the Golden Staff Imperial Teacher had many questions, he knew now wasn't the time to ask. He walked to the side and first circulated his energy to suppress his injuries. Ning Chen looked in the direction of Phoenix Perch Mountain, his heart heavy. There had been too many variables in this battle. The final terrifying aura that had appeared was without a doubt the Nether King. All he could feel was one word: powerful. So powerful that it made him despair. In the end, the Phoenix origin had still ended up in Bai Zhang's hands. The Nether King's descent wouldn't be far off. How to stop it would be the biggest problem in the future. Ning Chen closed his eyes, and blood qi soared around him. He used blood to refine his soul, notifying his main body of the danger. At the same time, in the Qizhou mountain range, within the Taotia's stomach, a white-robed figure trembled. She felt an intense pain in her divine sense and suddenly opened her eyes. Seeing her awaken, Dao Kuei waved his hand, and the black and white swords protecting the Taiji Yin-Yang formation transformed into streams of light that returned to the zither. "What is it?" asked Jiang Wangji. "My clone gave me a warning. Something must have happened outside." "Senior, I need to go out," said Ning Chen gravely. Jiang Wangji frowned, but he didn't stop him. "Be careful. You still haven't completely cultivated the life scroll's restrictions. Don't waste too much time. Also, your fifth tribulation should have arrived. Once you go out, do your best to suppress your tribulation. Otherwise, if the three calamities arrive, it will be extremely dangerous." "Yes." Ning Chen nodded. His figure flickered as he flew in the direction he had come from. Jiang Wangji plucked the zither, and a profound sound rang out. The Taotai opened its mouth, and a white light shot out and disappeared. Within the Grand Xia's imperial city, within the Marquis mansion, knowing destiny returned. After asking Meng Xuanji, his expression became serious. "Where's Luofei? Is she awake?" asked Ning Chen. "She's awake. She's in her room," replied Meng Xuanji. Ning Chen turned and walked out of the study. He went to Luofei's room and knocked on the door. "Please enter." A woman's voice came from the room. Ning Chen pushed open the door and entered. He looked at the woman in front of him and seriously said, "Luofei, I want to see the Eternal Night Religion Master." "Immediately." Luofei frowned. She stood up and said, "Let's go." A moment later, the two of them left the Marquis mansion and rushed west. Two people appeared in front of the Eternal Night God sect. Luofei took 2 steps forward and pressed a hand against the array formation. Suddenly, a white moonlight spread out and an entrance to the array formation appeared. Ning Chen followed her in. Just as he was about to continue, a blue spear light shot out. Luofei narrowed her eyes and her figure flashed. She flipped her palm to block the spear light. She said, "You go first. I'll block her." Ning Chen nodded. His feet moved and he rushed forward. "Luofei, you really betrayed the God sect." Chu Li's expression was ugly as he angrily shouted. "I'm sorry." Luofei didn't explain. Moonlight flashed in her hand. This was the first time she had attacked since she stepped into the 3 disasters. Chu Li waved his spear to meet her. The blue spear light was swift and fierce, showing no mercy at all. As the two of them fought, Ning Chen followed the path that Luofei had pointed out to him. They were running out of time, so they had to act as quickly as possible. The 3 great temples were already empty. In addition to Chu Li being blocked, the God sect's combat strength had temporarily entered a period of weakness. Ning Chen moved faster and faster. Before the Deep King noticed him, he rushed towards the forbidden area in the north of the God sect. Northern Tomb, the tomb of the God sect's previous temple masters. Ning Chen rushed over and cut open the layers of spells in front of him. Seeing the solemn stone tombs, he came to the newest one and said, "Religion Master, it's time." As soon as he finished his words, the earth rumbled and trembled. The next moment, the tomb made of huge stones collapsed. A handsome figure in black and red battle clothes walked out of the rubble. He glanced at the young man in front of him and said calmly, "Jiming Marquis, I finally found you." Time was tight. Ning Chen didn't want to waste any more time. He quickly explained the situation and then asked, "Religion Master, what is your choice?" "I'll risk my life to accompany you," the Eternal Night Religion Master said. After getting an affirmative answer, Ning Chen's expression became serious. He said, "Then please open the Central Spirit region. Follow me." The Eternal Night Religion Master stepped forward. The Eternal Night Religion Master's appearance shocked everyone in the God sect. The patrolling guards couldn't hide the shock on their faces. They were in a dilemma and didn't know what to do. Retreat. The Eternal Night Religion Master waved his hand and a powerful aura spread out. The guards along the way were all pushed back by more than 10 zhang. Ning Chen followed behind, his eyes flickering. Without a doubt, the Eternal Night Religion Master's original body was stronger than his doppelganger. However, their next opponent was the Deep King, who had surpassed the limits of human martial arts. No one could guarantee the result. This was different from any previous opponents. With the strength of the Nether King's level, no matter how many people went in, it would only increase the number of casualties. He and the Eternal Night Hierarch were the two with the strongest foundation in the Divine Great Land. If they couldn't resist, the others would only be sending themselves to their deaths. When they passed by the first shrine, Ning Chen stopped. He looked at the shrine and said, "Can we take the Eternal Night Divine Scripture with us?" The Eternal Night Religion Master shook his head and said, "No. Once there is something wrong with the Divine Scripture, the Deep King will notice it immediately. Now, destroying the Central Spirit region is more important. We will think of a way to take the Divine Scripture later." "Okay." Ning Chen nodded and continued to walk forward. In the third shrine, two people walked over. The Eternal Night Religion Master stopped and said, "Let me borrow the divine weapon of the Deep King." Ning Chen nodded and waved his right hand. The blood-colored demonic blade flew out and landed in the former's hand. The Eternal Night Religion Master held the demonic blade and activated his True Yuan. A powerful pressure shook the shrine. The matrix in the shrine felt it and many matrix patterns appeared, emitting dazzling light. The demonic blade slashed across and the space trembled. A huge hole opened. It was pitch black and silent. The Eternal Night Sect Master and Ning Chen walked in one after the other. The giant spatial ravine immediately closed up, and the formation patterns in the hall also disappeared. Peace was restored once more. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.